SaveWithConrad.com.
Eric Ward in Franklin, Tennessee. I first heard about Save with Conrad through a couple wrestling broadcasts I listened to. 83 Weeks and What Happened When with Tony Schiavone, and I decided to reach out, and I'm so glad that I did. It was an absolute fabulous process. I was in a transition mode, recently sold a home, and I was looking for a mortgage on a new home purchase. And Diana and the team at Supreme Lending was there to help me out. They were absolutely fabulous to work with. They were knowledgeable, responsive, and made the process incredibly smooth. And I'll tell you this, the online portal was an absolute game changer. It provided regular updates at every step, giving me full visibility into where we were at in the process. And on closing day, everything moved so fast that even my real estate agent was shocked. I'm telling you, I couldn't have been happier with the experience and would highly recommend Save with Conrad to anyone looking for a seamless mortgage process. I'm Eric Ward from Franklin, Tennessee, and I got into my dream home with SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 2129, Equal Housing Lender.
SaveWithConrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. John, what's going on, man? How are you?
Conrad, I am thrilled to be here again. I'm back. I don't know how Bruce didn't fire me this time already, but I'm back.
Man, I'm so glad you're back. The feedback I got for last week was outstanding. People were really surprised at how awesome you are at podcasting, but the secret's been out for a while. You've been doing stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw forever. Tell them about it.
Yeah, we started during COVID, and we thought we honestly just want to do something that sounds altruistic, just give some people something to smile about. So Jerry and I were on a text thread like everybody is that's horribly inappropriate and all those kind of things. And somebody said, hey, you guys ought to do a podcast. And we literally just started doing it for fun in COVID, just to give people something to look at when they're locked up at home. And we've done it ever since. We've had a blast. We interviewed, no telling, probably 200 legends over the last, or maybe 250 probably, because we've done it every week for just over 3 years. So we probably have as big a library on our YouTube channel as anybody as far as old legends in wrestling.
So if you haven't already, check it out. Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw. Man, I really had a lot of fun with last week's episode. Did you see any good feedback, or do you still have half of Twitter blocked?
I still have half of Twitter blocked, so I don't get any negatives. I have 17,811 people blocked on Twitter. I just looked before the show because I had told you that. I want to make sure I was correct. So yeah, any negative feedback I've got blocked. So if Elon Musk wants to know where the snowflakes are in America to like deport them, I've got a list. I got 17,811 of them right now that you can deport right now. Just get a big boat.
17,000 blocks. That's got to be a wrestling record, don't you think? You are the wrestling god, though. I mean, you're ruling over Twitter, I suppose.
True. I go on Twitter, it's on my phone, and people have a right to say whatever they want. I also have a right not to listen to them. So when people say something stupid or negative or whatever, I just block them.
Well, how about that? Join the block party, JBL's block party. Check him out.
I may block your social media guy, by the way. What a dick. The guy puts out a video to promote the show that we did last week. Now, listen, the Brawl for All, I had 4 fights. I won 3 of them, or the judges at least say I won 3 of them. One I get knocked out in. What does your social media guy put up? He puts up me getting knocked out.
Shout out to Derek.
I may have to block. I may have to block Something to Wrestle with.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That would be awesome. Go ahead and make that happen today. Speaking of people getting blocked, there was not a lot of blocking going on this past Friday night. Mike Tyson fought what we thought would be for sure his last fight. And afterwards, he says he's not sure he's done, but I think perhaps a lot of us are. What did you think of his performance against Jake Paul? What a spectacle. What an impressive house. I mean, there's no telling how many people streamed that thing. I guess we'll find out tomorrow as the story goes. But history is made. Jake Paul got the dub. What did you think, John?
I was disappointed. I'm a huge Mike Tyson fan, and I thought Tyson was not himself. I now see that, you look at the training videos he did. It's easy when you're able to orchestrate that. I just don't think he trained. I don't think he's trained hard since Customato. That's what happened to him with Buster Douglas. When you got in trouble, you don't need a champion racehorse a champion jockey on a racehorse until you get in trouble. And when Tyson didn't have a corner, it didn't matter until he got in trouble. And he hadn't really had a good training camp since. I just thought Tyson wasn't himself. I know he's 58, but he played a lot of defense, and he just looked slow moving. I just thought he wasn't in shape. I thought he got in shape as far as his body. That's a complete different shape for boxing, and I just didn't think I hate it because I love Mike Tyson. I didn't think he put the time in the ring is what I thought.
You mentioned being in shape, but we could physically see it looked like he was in shape. But we fans have heard something called ring shape. Can you explain the difference in ring shape from a wrestler's perspective?
Yeah, there's no comparison. They talk about you can do the Stairmaster forever, but they're getting in the ring and moving around like you do and having to give up and down. It is a complete different shape, and it's a complete different shape for anything you do. You look at the beginning of an NFL football season. These are some of the greatest athletes in the world. These guys have a real struggle, especially when they're playing in the South in the heat, finishing a game without getting tired and getting substitutes having to be put in. They're in great shape. They're not in game shape. Getting in game shape is completely different, especially for wrestling or boxing.
I'm convinced that Mike Tyson was injured. They asked him in the post-fight interview, and you could see him wearing a brace on a knee. Roy Jones was calling it out in commentary. It did feel like he was moving a lot slower than we saw in the training videos. I don't think there's a rematch opportunity out there at this point. It was pretty one-sided. Is there a spectacle you'd like to see Mike Tyson do one more time, or is that enough for you?
I think that's enough for me. I wish he was in shape. I think he hurt himself by not being shape. And I agree with you. I think he was hurt. He had no movement. He had no side movement. And when he walked back to his corner, you could see he was struggling to walk. He walked side to side like a guy that was having some type of leg problems. I don't think there is. I think for Jake Paul there is. I think there's huge upside for Jake Paul, which, by the way, you talk about the work rate. People love to talk about work rate on the internet and things and telling stories and the difference. These guys told a story.
Yes.
When they put 70,000 people in an arena, it was probably the most watched boxing spectacle of all time. Yes. And that to me is the difference. Now, should you do both? It's not an either or, but you have great boxers out there that will spend their entire life. You can put 100 of them together. It won't make what Jake Paul made in that one night. Getting people interested to come to matches to me is so much more important than work rate. You want both. I don't mean to denigrate one or the other, but you got to have people with interest.
We saw in the post-match there was at least a mention of Logan Paul by Mike Tyson. Do you think there's a chance we see Mike Tyson versus Logan Paul at WrestleMania? Is that too far out there?
I think it'd be awesome. I think it'd be awesome to have Jake Paul at WrestleMania and have Logan Paul at WrestleMania. Those two guys are amazing to me. I mean, absolutely amazing. They've done incredible things, and with their internet, with their YouTube that they're doing, it's a story that's beyond belief. Everybody talks about how you can get on the internet and get over. Those guys have gotten over, and they're making hundreds of millions of dollars, the career lifetime earnings, because of the fact that they've gotten over.
I mean, just this past weekend, we saw Jake Paul make over $40 million. So it feels like, big things are on the horizon for him. We'll see if that Canelo thing comes true, but Mike Tyson, Logan Paul at WrestleMania, that could be interesting. Also interesting is Stipe retired on Saturday night. John Jones is still the man in the UFC. I don't know if you got a chance to catch any of the highlights, but are you a UFC fan? And what do you think about their sort of partnership with WWE? We saw Triple H and Stephanie sitting ringside. Not that many years ago, that was not possible. Now everybody's on the same team. What do you think of that?
I think it's awesome. The synergies that you have with UFC and with WWE are enormous. And I'm not talking about fighters doing both. They only have, one Brock Lesnar that can do something like that. And there's been a couple others. Dan Severn did both actually at the same time. But I don't think there's the crossover as far as athletes. But as far as the social media, as far as the arenas, I mean, you can go down to Brazil now and run a big pay-per-view, a premium live event for WWE and for UFC, and also put a TV show together down there because you have the same arenas, you have the same cable channels. There's so many synergies globally with these guys that you can do a lot. This is a terrific merger, in my opinion. I always thought it was.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens because it does feel like this company is poised for a lot of growth. I've predicted on some other podcasts that I think 2025 is going to be the biggest year in wrestling history. I don't think I'm going to walk that back at all. It feels like they've got more momentum than ever right now. Don't you agree? Conrad,
it's unbelievable what they're doing right now. The revenue that they're bringing in and the gates that they're bringing in and the eyeballs that they're bringing in. TV is measured now differently than it was. When you drew a 8.1 rating when we were unopposed to WCW, that'll never happen again. But we didn't have 100 million people on social media watching. I mean, these guys are drawing eyeballs all over the world. Vince McMahon told me in the early 90s that he had an idea to have academies and regional territories on all the different continents. And I don't know if that's what they're going toward. I have no insight into what they're doing, but that's what it looks like. Imagine having a separate territory in South America, in Europe, in Asia, and then having a legit world champion come together. You can do that in both UFC and with WWE now because of their presence globally.
I can't wait for us to talk more about WWE in 2025. But today's topic is the late, great Eddie Guerrero. I can't believe this is real, but we just passed the anniversary of his passing last week. Does it feel like it's been like 19 years, man?
No, I can remember like it was yesterday, unfortunately, because it was such a sad memory walking into the arena there in Minneapolis and seeing Chavo and Rey Mysterio together. I knew something was horribly wrong. And so I went over there to talk to him, and I knew it was, nothing that was minor. I knew something really major had happened. That's when I found out that Eddie had passed. And yeah, it feels like it was yesterday. What a good guy. Conrad, people ask me all the time, what do I regret most in life? When you make as many mistakes as I do, you probably should regret a lot, but the thing I regret the most is that Eddie Guerrero is not here. Yeah. I wish Eddie were here now so that he could be on the show with us, so I can sit around and talk to him and, like the old guys, bash the young guys for not knowing what they're doing. But Eddie was such a nice person and such a great person. He influenced so many people, not just by what he did in the ring, but what he did outside the ring because of who he was. Our world has really missed out by Eddie not being here.
Totally agree. And it's one of those things, especially this time of year, I think we all start to think about family members who aren't with us anymore. Around the holidays, I think we all get a little more reflective. And before we get started talking about our topic today, I want to remind you what's coming up just in time for the holiday season. Of course, I'm talking about Manscaped, the Chairman Pro electric foil shaver. It's like Rudolph for your face. It's going to guide you to a smooth, irritation-free shave. Head on over to manscaped.com and join the over 11 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using our code STW to get 20% off plus free shipping. You're going to be the best groomed at the family dinner. The Chairman Pro is the real deal. It's got 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads. You've got the 4-blade foil when you want that baby's bottom smooth. And you've even got the stubble trimmer when you want to keep some stubble, but just clean it up. What you're looking for is to look sharp, but minimizing that razor burn and irritation. And the Chairman Pro has Flex Adjust technology. It's like the holiday miracle of shaving. The blades and the pivoting head adjust to every curve of your face and your neck. It's like they almost had the foresight, right? Go ahead, kiss that awkward jawline patch goodbye. No more pretending it doesn't exist and hoping nobody notices under the mistletoe. The Chairman Pro is also waterproof. You can use it right in the shower. They've even got a precision lock. So when you lock it, you're going to get a more precise shave. Did I mention that not only is it waterproof, but it also makes cleaning up a whole heck of a lot easier? Just rinse it under the sink and you're good to go. It's not just for daily shaves either. It can do up to 5 days of growth. And you've got 75 minutes runtime on a single charge. Did I mention there's an LED spotlight too? It's the real deal, and it's the ultimate gift for you or someone in your life who's a little hard to buy for. How about the Chairman Pro? Go get it today and experience a shave that's as smooth as you deserve. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code STW at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code STW at manscaped.com. So, John, I don't think you met Eddie until working in the WWF. Like when he comes over from WCW, that's probably the first time you meet him. But you knew his family from way back when, right?
Yeah. I knew his family. And of course, grew up in West Texas, so I knew of the Guerrero family also very well. I met Hector later. We were working both for Crockett when Crockett tried to open up Texas, and he loved Hector for very good reason. Hector is an unbelievably talented guy. We talk about our podcast. We had Hector on our show. There's not a Guerrero that's not a good guy. Guerreros are just fun people. They love life. Mondo, by the way, named after the riot that Gory got in Mexico City. So these guys have got incredible wrestling history, but they're all just fun guys. When I used to see a brawl break out on Raw, I go, looks like a Guerrero family reunion, and that's pretty much what it was. They are fun people, but they love to get rowdy.
I know you spent a little time with Hector, and I don't know that some of our younger fans may realize this, but it's clear that Eddie drew inspiration from some of Hector's old promos back in the day, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Hector was a great promo. Chavo, drew massive money. I know you're talking about Hector, but Chavo drew massive money back in the Coliseum. Chavo was a huge star. There's stories about Chavo and Frank Sinatra going out together. I mean, Chavo was the man back in the day. And then Hector was just like that. Not as much in the Coliseum. By the way, Chavo and Roddy Piper in the Coliseum, when Piper was just barely a teenager turning 20, were drawing huge sellouts back in the day. And Hector, it was much the same. I mean, like I say, there's not a Guerrero that couldn't work. And Hector was somebody that Eddie modeled himself after, because Eddie was by far the youngest guy. When you talk about Chavo, Chavo was almost, the age of Eddie's uncle. Chavo Jr. is almost more Eddie's age because there's such a difference in the boys, how they were born under Gory.
I know that a lot of people probably don't put two and two together, but you and Eddie actually had similar routes into getting to big-time professional wrestling. You both start in Texas. You're both going to work in Mexico. You're both going to work in Japan. You're going to add some stops in Europe. Back in those days, why was getting that international exposure important to your progression as a performer, do you think?
It was two things. One, you had to make money, and we couldn't make money. The territories were dying then, and you couldn't really make money in many territories in the States, so you had to go overseas. The only money I was making that was decent was in Mexico and in Japan, and then later when I got the job in Europe, that was the best job I'd ever had before the WWE job. So you had to go overseas to make money, but we also knew an educational background was important. To get over in one territory, which is hard, by the way, and if you can get over one territory, generally you can get over in another. It's hard to get over. But we'd go from territory to territory, and everyone was different. Memphis was different from Texas. Dallas was different from Amarillo. They're all different from Florida. Everything, the difference of the Carolinas with the fast moving and the tag teams, every territory was different. So it was an educational experience. By the time you got to WWE, most guys had 500 to 1,500 matches and had been champions somewhere, kind of like college football. Everybody that comes in to play college football has been a star of a high school somewhere. But to get that educational experience, you had to go to a lot of different places, which is what's so hard today for these young kids starting out in wrestling. I don't see how you can go straight to television. I don't see how The Miz went straight to global television and still made a Hall of Fame career. I mean, that's incredible. I'm not sure that I could have done that, or any guys I broke in could have done that. These guys now, when they come, they're really at a disadvantage because they didn't have that background that we had. And a lot of that was just, you had to go where the work was.
How much of Eddie's work had you seen before he joined the company? Because I know you're traveling all the time and wrestling yourself. So the last thing you want to do, I'm sure, when you get home with the wife or the girlfriend is, hey, let's watch some more other wrestling. I get that. But did you see any at all?
Yeah, I saw some, but not much. I mean, for one thing, there's nothing Eddie did that I could do. So it wasn't like I needed to watch his matches because I was trying to poach something or learn how to work. Right. He was incredible. I saw him in WCW mainly. I saw a little bit of stuff from Mexico, but mainly in WCW when Eric brought out the cruiserweights, which were just phenomenal matches back then. And, Eddie was part of that. And so we got to watch a lot of that. It was so much fun to watch. And so I did see some of it, but again, we worked every night. And so it wasn't like we didn't want to watch other programs. I didn't see ECW basically until I showed up at ECW Arena in 2004, 2005.
Let's talk a little bit about the Radicals jumping over. That's a big jump in early 2000. It's Chris Benoit, it's Dean Malenko, it's Perry Saturn, and of course it's Eddie Guerrero. You were there at the time. Like, when you hear that, hey, there's 4 guys as a group coming over from WCW, how do you remember receiving that news? How was that received by the boys in the locker room?
The boys loved it. There wasn't the competition between WWE and WCW was more between the higher ups, and because that was a zero-sum game for those guys. Eric Bischoff, I know he kind of says that he wasn't wanting to put Vince out of business, but I think that was probably the case. I think you knew when you went head to head with him that one guy was going to go out of business and one guy was not. So I'm sure that animosity between the top guys who were done, if whoever loses, was real. It wasn't between the boys. And so when we saw those guys coming over, we thought, man, this is fantastic. We've got some incredible talent coming. Those 4 guys were incredible talent. 2 of the guys went on to become champions and headline WrestleMania. We knew how good they were, and we knew how exciting it was, an influx of talent into our roster. And when you do something like that, you basically just line up and think, how can I work with these guys? Because they're going to get a huge push, and you want that rub from working with them.
From a camaraderie standpoint, when a group comes in like that, does anything change? Like who rides with who, or the clique, not the actual clique with Shawn Michaels and Kevin Nash. I'm just saying, I know there are groups of guys who are friends in real life. Does that dynamic change when you get this many new guys at one time?
Not with those guys. Those guys were different. I mean, those guys are some of the most liked guys in the history of the business. I know there's, Chris Benoit fell off the deep end and did some horrific things, but Chris was back then was just considered a good guy. Eddie Guerrero, people loved Eddie, and Perry and Dean were the same. Those guys fit in incredibly well. So it wasn't like you brought guys in that were standoffish or were divas. They weren't. They were guys who fit in really well. Now, different guys that came in over the years, you can add a little element to it. It kind of upsets the dressing room a little bit, but not with those guys.
I've always been fascinating, just the unspoken rules of wrestling. Like I know once upon a time you went around and you introduced yourself to everybody and you shook their hands and all that. Was wrestler etiquette like that in place in January of 2000, as best you can recall?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I don't know when it changed. I think it's changed now because I don't see that in the buildings, which is fine. That was our tradition, and that was how we did it. And they do it differently now, and they're drawing huge crowds, so they're doing something right. But yeah, 100%. That was when you go into any place. The first thing, especially if you're a new person, you literally go in the restroom, around the dressing room, say hi to everybody you know, and introduce yourself to people that you don't. I still do that to this day, no matter what room I'm in.
When do you think the wrestler handshake went away? I mean, like the limp dead fish handshake. When did that go away?
In the mid-90s. In the mid-90s. I remember, man, people used to, God almighty, that was the worst thing ever. I mean, the worst thing ever. Guys that come up, they had that little limp noodle handshake with you. They want to show you're a worker. Look at the guy's forehead. You can tell he's a worker or not. You don't need him shaking your hand with some limp noodle. I tell you this, if you tried that with Vince McMahon, he might fire you. I mean, seriously, there's been times where I've shaken hands with Vince, and Vince always had a firm handshake, and I just missed his hand a little bit, and he goes, "Let's try that again." And literally, we'd do it again. Vince hated that working handshake. Nobody did that with Vince. And so I don't know if that's part of what's killed it, but a lot of the guys later just thought this is one of the dumbest things ever, this stupid handshake we're doing. You felt like an idiot doing it, especially when you do it in public. People look at you like two big guys shaking hands, with this limp noodle way. I thought it was awful, and I'm glad it's gone. But that started disappearing in the mid-90s. Older guys, especially guys who didn't make it, would tell you, I could always tell a worker by how they shake hands. So I'd always shake hands as stiff as I could with them, just to let them know that I didn't play. And everybody would. I mean, those guys, there were some idiots there's some people that still do it.
Oh, goodness. Well, times are changing, and that's why we recommend you check out Lumen. It's the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs. Then it gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, your workouts, your sleep, and even your stress management. All you got to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know exactly what's going on with your metabolism, meaning whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. And then Lumen will give you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can breathe into your Lumen before and after workouts and meals, so you'll know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And here's why your metabolic health matters. Think of your metabolism as like your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. And your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does. So optimal metabolic health means easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, even better sleep. Lumen's recommendations are designed to improve your pre- and post-workout fueling for better performance and recovery, so you can power through your toughest workouts and add on muscle mass. So if you want to stay on track with your health this holiday season, go right now to lumen.me/wrestle to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/wrestle for 15% off your purchase. Lumen makes a great gift too, and we thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring today's podcast. Hey, so let's talk about, let's fast forward a little bit, because you're doing the APA thing, they're doing the Radicals thing, but we know there's going to be a shift, and we'll talk about the breakup of APA some other time. But when you emerge as this JBL character, and it's written about as being a combination of, I can't believe this is real, J.R. Ewing and Colonel Robert Parker. We'll talk a little bit about JBL some other time, but the rumor and innuendo is when they're looking for an opponent for Eddie Guerrero, Kurt Angle's injured, so we're going to make him a general manager. Brock Lesnar's going away post WrestleMania 20. Yep. They need a big heel for Eddie Guerrero, and allegedly Eddie picks you. Is that the way you've heard it?
Yeah, and also Big Show was out at the same time. I mean, I got incredibly lucky. somebody told me that Eddie had picked me, and that's news to me. And he may have, by the way. Eddie and I were really close friends, and I don't know if Eddie did or not. I was more of Vince's idea. Vince had tried about 3 years before. I'd been told that Vince thought I could be a world champion, a WWE champion. And it really surprised me at the time. And I just been snake bit. Every time I started to get a push, I got hurt. My opponent got hurt. Then I blow out a bicep and I'm out for 6 months. I try to come back. I get a hernia. And that's about the same time that Vince called me. And when I'm coming back from all of that, I really thought at the time, Conrad, that I was pretty much done. Ron had gotten up in years. He's a little bit older than me. I retired a few years earlier than Ron retired. Ron wrestled probably longer than he should have because of his injuries. And I thought I was just going to be a liaison between WWE and the Middle East and the troops. After 9/11, there was such a patriotic fervor in the country of supporting the troops, especially. And so with the tribute to the troops, I was going over there once or twice a year. And plus I kept getting hurt. And I thought that was going to be my role. And then Vince calls me and says, hey, we want to try this idea. Well, this is something that they had kind of pitched for 2 or 3 years, 2 or 3 different times. So this wasn't new. It wasn't completely out of the blue, but it was a shock that in about whatever short length of time, I was going to be with Eddie Guerrero at the Staples Center in the main event for the title.
It's so interesting to think, we've always heard from a UFC standpoint that styles make fights, but in wrestling, sometimes it's the chemistry between the guys. When did you know that you and Eddie were going to have chemistry? Was it right away?
It was right away. Eddie and I were good friends. We grew up basically the same top area of Texas. And there's, Texas is very different. It's a huge state. West Texas is completely different from East Texas, from South Texas, from the Panhandle. Eddie and I knew so many of the same type of people. And Eddie and I grew up pretty much a lot of the same way. And then we broke in pretty much the same way. We had a lot of respect for each other and a lot of love for each other. We were really close friends. I thought it would work. I knew Eddie could do his part. It's kind of like working with the Undertaker. If the match is bad, it's not Undertaker's fault. So I knew Eddie would do his part and do it fantastically. I was just hoping I'd be able to keep up with Eddie, and I thought I could. I just didn't know if it'd been years since I'd been in a main event singles run, and not in WWE. I'd had some main event matches, but not runs. And so I knew this was a one and done deal if it didn't work out. But I felt very comfortable with Eddie, and Eddie felt very comfortable with me.
You do have a unique opportunity here to go. At this point, you've been a really Hall of Fame tag team run at this point with APA. So, we often see when a tag team breaks up, hey man, some guys, rise to the occasion, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. And that was their legacy. They're a tag team wrestler. In an alternate universe, if you're with anybody other than Eddie, the JBL character may not have taken off the way it did, right? He's the perfect guy for you to make that transition from tag team to main event against, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I had the perfect character to play off of Eddie. So yeah, 100%. Randy Orton talked one time about how when he got the title, when he became the youngest title holder in WWE, that he was a little too young for it. I understand that in hindsight. If I'd have got a push when I came in like I thought I should have, everybody when they comes in thinks they should get that push. I'm glad I didn't, because I think it would have blown it. I needed the tutorship of Dutch Mantell and Barry Windham, and then Ron Simmons, the biggest influence in my life. Ron really taught me how to be a heel. Ron really taught me how to be a champion and how to carry myself that way. But without Eddie Guerrero, this would have never worked. This would have been a one and done deal. There's no way that this works with anybody but Eddie Guerrero. People just wouldn't have believed it. I got very lucky with the opponent. I got very lucky with the angle that we did down in El Paso with his mother, but it was all because of Eddie.
One of the first angles that you guys do together is Kurt Angle is going to announce as the general manager on SmackDown that he's going to award a real American trophy to the #1 contender. And he says that Cena got the most votes on the internet, but before he can get the trophy, Layfield shows him a video of him at the border stopping Mexicans from coming into the United States. You're going to cut a promo talking about how Mexicans are ruining the economy, healthcare, the welfare system for all of us hardworking Americans. You even chase some Mexicans. That's Rudy Boy Gonzalez.
Yep.
Friend of Shawn Michaels, a mainstay in the Texas wrestling scene. Of course, Kurt Angle loves all this and gives you the trophy. But as it turns out, Eddie switches the trophies, and the new trophy now has a picture of Eddie Guerrero. This is hilarious. Eddie's going to come out with a lowrider. He's got the actual trophy on the hood of the car. This is the way we really get this thing kicked off. Is this one of the most important nights in the history of your career, do you think?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. For one, I'm not sure why I'm not the border czar for Trump coming up. I mean, I did such a great job down there. And people were
20 years now. My God.
That's right. People were so happy with it. Now there's now coming around to realizing that the JBL was right. And
oh my God.
And that's the story. You've heard it. I know you're not talking about somebody else, where me and Bruce almost got shot showing up to a wrong ranch. And the guy knew my dad is the only reason I think the only reason he didn't shoot us legitimately.
Tell us that whole story. Go ahead.
So we were in East Texas, and we set up to go to a ranch down there. And we had Rudy Boy come up, and Bruce came down, and my father grew up in that area. And so we go to a ranch. We got guys with flashlights out looking around because we're going to shoot it at dark. And some rancher comes up, and all he does is he sees all these guys with flashlights looking in his house. And this old rancher comes up with a gun in his lap, and he is determined to shoot me and Bruce. 100%. He's determined to shoot us. And when he's talking to us, he never pulls the gun and points it at us, but he's got the gun in his lap, and it's not there for show. You can tell. Right. He's not happy that he thinks we're robbing his ranch, and he doesn't know what's going on, but he thinks we're robbing it. So finally, I'm trying to explain to the guy, and I said, he said, "What's your name?" I said, "John Layfield, sir." He said, "You related to Lavelle Layfield?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "That's a good man." I said, "That's my dad." He goes, "You're kidding me." He goes, "Well, what are you doing here?" And all of a sudden he puts the gun up, and I said, "We're at the wrong place, sir. And you just almost shot us." He goes, I did almost shoot you." So, we were like off by one or two ranches or something, but literally we almost got shot. Thank God the guy knew my dad, and that eased the whole situation.
When you're shooting that vignette and putting it together with JBL running people off at the border, did you know immediately how that was going to be received? I mean, what we heard at the time reading the newsletters is that SmackDown was really aimed towards the Latino audience, and that was the audience they were trying to grow. That was the priority for SmackDown. So you doing a character like this and skits like this, boy, this is just instant heat. Did you feel like, hey, this is money when you're doing it, or were you maybe not so sure how this would be received?
I thought it was really good. I really thought it was good. We got lucky, or I got lucky, because when Eddie won the title, and I don't think they had these towns booked before they planned on putting the title on Eddie. I'm not sure. We were in the Southwest United States for the next almost 2 months. So we had a massive Latino audience in every live event we went to. And I don't know if they had planned that out on purpose. I don't think they did, but they could have. If they did, it was brilliant. So we were really lucky in responses we were getting, because Eddie was so freaking over in all these places, especially there. He's over with the, place, people of all colors, but especially in the Latino community, because he was this great Latino champion. I knew then that this video, if we did it right, could be really good. It was kind of modeled off of Tombstone, where he's on the train station platform. You tell him to come back, and hell's coming with me. That was what I was thinking of as we were doing it. I knew it was good.
When you have a vignette like this or a segment like this, I know that Bruce is there sort of running and shooting with you, but when Vince first sees the clip, are you there? Is this something he sees at the show, at the building, before it makes air, and you guys are around to monitor, or what's that like?
I did watch it with Vince, but I did not watch it the first time with Vince. I don't think he wanted to watch it back. He loved it. He thought it was terrific. He thought it was just fantastic. You know what? A good heel doesn't know they're a heel, and a good heel speaks truth. Now, that truth may be skewed through the lens that the heel has in his brain, that there's a reason for it. But a good heel just doesn't say, "You people suck." And the reason you say "you people suck" is because they're a bad guy. The good heel explains why those people suck. A good heel explains why he's doing things, and there's a method behind it other than "I'm just a bad guy." And so what we were doing, a lot of this was what was going on for real on the border, still is to this day. I just took it to a different level and put myself in a heel character, dealing with immigrants who are just coming over for a better life. However you view that, which I certainly had a different view, because I grew up on a ranch working with guys who are undocumented illegal guys. I have a complete different view about the migrant workers that come over. But I knew how hot of a topic it was, and so did Eddie. Eddie gave us a lot of feedback going into this about what we needed to say, what we needed to do. Eddie was very involved in everything we did.
Yeah, that's where I was getting to, is his involvement, because obviously if you're doing something that, hey, listen, it's going to offend some people, you probably want to make sure he's cool with it all too. But hey, man, you were his handpicked guy from what we've heard. And as you've said, the narrative has been out there that once he becomes champion, they do start to try to cater towards more Latin markets. Like even the title change, supposedly they knew that there was a big Latin population in San Francisco, and that's where they wanted to do it. So everything you're saying makes sense about what towns they're picking and when. But we've also heard the other side of that. Bruce has told us here on this program that, man, Eddie felt the pressure of being the champion. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, Eddie felt it tough. And I wish he'd got the title again because I think he'd have been fine with it. When he got it the first time, it was, and I've seen this happen a lot with champions. Some people grow with the title. Some people shrink with the title. Some people become overwhelmed with the title. Eddie became a little bit overwhelmed with it. And I don't mean that from the ring work, but Eddie was always looking at ratings and looking at crowd size. And it really, okay, well, the rating was down here. Maybe, is that my fault? And I would say, Eddie, you weren't even in the segment. So no, it wasn't your fault. It really weighed on him being champion. He knew the pressure of it. He took that pressure really tough. And I wish he had become champion again because he would have, I think he'd have been completely different. Now, that being said, none of it showed in his work. Absolutely zero of it ever showed in his work that he was cracking or anything else. But there was a lot of pressure you could tell that Eddie felt. And by what he talked about, I said, hey, let's just do quality. Let's not worry about ratings. Let's not worry about crowds. And he go, well, we got to do this. We got to do that. It really weighed on him.
When do you think that changed? I mean, I know that your in-ring career ended, or maybe it did. I'm not sure. But you've been around the business the entire time. I mean, since 1995, you've been around the WWE and had your ear to the grindstone, so to speak. But it does feel like there was a shift where at some point, whoever held the title no longer felt that same responsibility, or am I off base?
I think it depends on the champion. It's tough. In a bad territory, nobody wants the championship. Undertaker used to get the championship when business was bad, right? And he had to carry the company. That's a tough role that nobody wants. They would call him, say, oh, hey, Undertaker, he just had a surgery or whatever happened. Hey, we got to break glass and bring you out because business is down. So they'd bring him back just to revive something. That's one of the toughest roles there is. When a territory is hot, everybody wants to be on top. When a territory is not, it doesn't. And that started changing to me, I think, when you had several title changes in a row, say in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, and you had so many different people going back and forth between shows. It was no longer like this is a SmackDown show. When we went to the Staples Center, we knew this was a SmackDown show, 100%. Now, when you go, you don't know for sure later how it happened. Okay, this is a WWE show, and I think you lose that pressure on the main guy to say, okay, I sold the place out or I didn't.
Right.
Because Conrad, you're right. You don't see that in a lot of people. You don't see that. I think Cody Rhodes has understood what being the main guy is very well, and I think he's done an incredible job. I think he's done a wonderful job. The workload that he's under is so admirable. I mean, it's really he's like Cena. Yeah, the guy never stops. He understands how important it is to be when you're the lead face. You got to put people in seats, and you got to put cash in the company's pockets. And I think Cody does a terrific job with it. Cena did a terrific job with it. There's so many people that did, but there's a lot of champions in there between that never really felt that. That's a good point.
I want to ask you about the difference between Raw and SmackDown, but before we do, I want to remind you guys that Magic Spoon's delicious cereal is now being made available. I can't believe this is real. As high protein treats that are light, crispy, and taste just like the classic crunchy cereal bars we all grew up on. Now, the Magic Spoon cereal is fantastic because it has 13 grams of protein, 0 grams of sugar, and 4 grams of net carbs, so you can actually feel good about what you're eating. The most popular flavors are fruity and cocoa, but there's many more. Dave Silva absolutely loves the peanut butter cup. And I want to mention that the brand new treats for Magic Spoon are an easy way to get 12 grams of protein on the go. They're crispy, they're crunchy, they're airy. And for the first time ever, Magic Spoon treats are available in grocery stores with delicious flavors like marshmallow and chocolatey peanut butter. My favorite, though, is the double chocolate. I just loaded up. I double dog dare you to try it. I'm telling you, you're going to love it. My buddy Double J keeps them in the glove box of his Tahoe, so as he's running errands, he's not tempted to eat bad. You can feel good about eating Magic Spoon. Get $5 off your next order at magicspoon.com/wrestle or look for Magic Spoon on Amazon in your nearest grocery store. That's right. Magic Spoon is on Amazon and in your grocery store now, but it really helps the show if you go to magicspoon.com/wrestle. You'll get $5 off. Magic Spoon. Hold on to the dream. So, John, back then, we all sort of looked at Raw as the A show and SmackDown as the B show. And we were led to believe that that's the way Vince felt about it too. Allegedly, there was a lot of emphasis put on Raw, and, well, SmackDown's here too, but it's not nearly as important. That's the way we perceived it as fans. How do you think Vince felt about Raw versus SmackDown 20 years ago?
Look at all the stars that would come in. The stars that would come in, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and guys that would come in and would do something with the television shows. They did it with Raw. Raw was his flagship show. He started Raw. That was his baby. And there is no doubt about it. We felt that way the whole time. When we were at SmackDown, it was kind of a cool thing because we felt like we were the underdog. We felt like we were the underdog to the Raw team. Now, again, there's not any animosity between the Raw boys and SmackDown boys. We're all doing the same thing. But we really felt like we were the underdogs. And we would check how big the crowds were, where we were in spot shows. We would check the ratings, how they were, and we'd check out the live events, how they were. So there were so many things that we would check because we felt the same way. We felt like we were the little redheaded stepchild.
Tell me about the writing team that was different. There's Bruce calling right now.
That's Bruce right there.
He's wanting to make sure that we did the Magic Spoon ad. Hey, look, talk to me a little bit about the difference behind the scenes. Like, we know that, that we've seen the different rosters, but was there a different writing team? Do you think the process was different because it was taped? Like, I've heard that there's different narratives out there that, we'll fix it in post was the attitude for sometimes on SmackDown. You were there. What was the difference between the two?
Yeah, we were happy to have different writing teams. We're happy to have everything. And Vince did a great job back then. I think they should do the same thing now. And at times they blurred the line between the two shows, and there really wasn't a difference. There really was a difference back then. And as far as the pressure, I always liked the live TV. I felt like it had an edge to it, but we didn't have that. And so we had the ability of tape. So guys would, guys could run over, guys could do a spot twice. You do this headlock tackle drop down. Somebody messes it up, you just grab it again. And Scott Hall used to actually turn to the camera and do that for two.
Oh my gosh.
He literally would turn that into the camera for two to force them to do to retape the spot.
Yes.
And to edit it out. And so there was some of that. We were I hate saying we're the B show. We were the B show. And I don't think there's any doubt about it. Vince would not agree with that, by the way. There's no way that you could ask him, is this the B show? But the way we were treated, and I don't mean treated bad, the emphasis was on Raw. It was your flagship show. It was I don't know if it's 3-hour show then or 2-hour show, whatever it was then. It was the show that was the longest running show in television. It was the show, and rightfully so. I had no issue with that.
Let's talk a little bit about how we start to heat things up. I want to give everybody the perspective here. We're fresh off of WrestleMania 20. Eddie Guerrero's the world champion. We just saw that great ending to the show where you see Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero and all the ticker tape falling, and they're hugging as world champions. And now what's next? And we know what's going to happen on the Raw side of things is a rematch with Shawn Michaels and Triple H. But on the SmackDown side of things, since Kurt's got to have surgery, he's now the GM. Big Show, he's injured. He's going to need some time off for a shoulder and something else. And now, of course, we've got Brock Lesnar. He's out of here. Adios. So now here you are, and we're going to try to get you ready to transition from being a tag team wrestler to being in the main event, as you mentioned, at Staples Center. And as we're getting ready to go there, you guys are going to start working house shows together. On the house shows, you're going to continue to do your sort of anti-immigration or anti-border crossing, whatever the JBL narrative was at the time in some towns. And then other markets, you'll just specifically denigrate them in their local town. Whatever it is, you're getting the reaction you want. But then the bell rings, and the reports are that you guys go from having good matches to great matches on the house show. Is that the way that you felt too? Like immediately there was improvement and you guys were gelling?
Yeah, I thought it was. And first of all, let me tell you, the day after WrestleMania, Eddie walked out. I'm standing by Jack Lanza, and he walked out. And you never know when a guy gets the championship, is it the right thing or not? Sometimes the crowd will respond to it. Sometimes it buries the guy. Sometimes if you chase something long enough and all of a sudden now the underdog has become the champion, it actually hurts them, which we've seen a lot of times. Eddie walked out that next night, and I'm standing by Jack Lanza. And to this day, I don't know if I've ever heard an ovation bigger. I may have heard some as big. You couldn't be bigger. The play, it was deafening when Eddie Guerrero walked out. Lanza looked at me. He goes, well, that answers your question, kid. He goes, Jesus Christ. He goes, what a pop. It was unreal. I mean, people loved the fact that Eddie had won that title against the beast, Brock Lesnar. The problem was Brock was on the video game. Brock was everywhere. Brock was the guy who's going to carry the company forever. And then Brock leaves. And all of a sudden, I come in and I'm replacing Brock. That ain't going to work. I knew it. I knew how tough it was, but when you get an opportunity, you got to take it. And the matches, I felt the same way. We started off, and I got a feel for Eddie. And I knew that style, man. I knew that style backward and forward. And I knew what I was at that point. I was older. I think I was 38. I think I was. Somebody will check me, obviously. At the time, I'd been around a long time. And I knew what my role was. And I knew what Eddie's role was. And he knew the same. He knew how to work with a bigger guy. He knew how to work with a bully, a real heel. And things just got better and better and better, man. It was so pleasurable being out there. I can't even describe it to you how great it was. We never had the same match. We never started the same. We never talked about one thing backstage, not one thing. We would never talk over one thing. Maybe the finish was the only thing that we would discuss. And that was just one or two things leading up to it. How we got there was different. It was such a pleasure being out there with Eddie.
It is different, though, isn't it, to work a house show match versus working a TV match? I mean, a TV match, you got to play to the hard cam, and you're really playing to the TV, and you've got all the pressure of the lights and the time and the hard outs for commercials, and you've got to really hit your mark. On a house show, maybe you get a little more creative liberty, and you can do more crowd work and that sort of thing. That's probably important for you to establish yourself firmly as a heel for that crowd in that night. But is there anything else that you and Eddie were doing on the house shows that we wouldn't see on TV?
Yeah, we would try things every night because we knew we had to put together a good match at the Staples Center. We knew the pressure was on us we knew we were the B show. And we were the B show who just lost a bunch of people. We were just the B show who just lost Brock and Big Show and Kurt, who was still on air but not wrestling. We knew how weak the roster was. Thank God we had Taker still there and a couple other guys. But we knew what we had to do at Staples Center. So every night we would try different things. We'd go out there. Some things worked. Some things didn't. I'll tell you something about a live event that you can't do on television. We're out there one day and Taker is ahead of us, and try going on after Taker, especially when Taker realizes he's not the last match. He went out there, he put on a hell of a match. It was one of the best matches I've ever seen. We're in some house show somewhere, and he goes out there for half an hour and just kills it. I mean, absolutely kills it. And I'm sitting there with Eddie. I'm going, "Essay, how are we going to follow this shit? What are we going to do?" And I'm sitting there watching, going, this is a great match. We got to follow it. I got out there with Eddie, and I had an idea. We're going to go Wild West. We're going to go outside the ring. We're going to go out in the chairs. We're going to go all this stuff. I grabbed Eddie in a headlock, and I said, tackle, drop down, two arm drags, which we used to take. Eddie gave these great, almost Jack Briscoe type arm drags. Yes. And I go flying out of the ring on the second arm drag. Then Eddie come flying over the top rope on me. We had this great spot that we would do. And that's what I called right off the bat because I thought we're going to keep them up. We're going to follow this match. No doubt about it. And Eddie goes, no, S.A., sit here. I got him in a headlock. So I'm sitting there. The crowd's still buzzing from that Taker match. And I said, okay, Eddie, let's do the spot. He goes, no, S.A., sit here. And I said, Eddie, let's do the spot. He goes, no, S.A., just sit here. And Eddie just kind of started relaxing. And right away I thought, God, come on. I know better. I know exactly what he's doing. And I should have thought of that myself, but I didn't. He's freaking genius. So we sat there, I mean, for 4 or 5 minutes. And just killed the crowd. Absolutely killed them. Absolutely killed them. And as we sat there, the crowd was still buzzing for this match. They kind of got less and less. Then you kind of heard them talking to themselves. You kind of heard them meandering around. You saw some people go to the concession stand. We're still sitting there in a headlock. And as soon as we got low enough, Eddie goes, okay, S.A., let's go. And we did some spots and started building up to it. And by the time we got done, they were back on their feet again, thanks to Eddie's genius. But we could have never done that on a television show, and on a live event, being out there with a guy like Eddie who understood it so well, I'd panicked. Eddie did not. And we sat there and we took him down just like you're supposed to, got him really low. then we slowly started building back up. And then we started doing the high flying later and all this stuff, and finished with the big frog splash, and everybody left home happy. But it's something you can do in a live event that you realize, this is kind of cool. I'm painting a picture here, and I'm leading the crowd. The crowd's not leading me. And that's a big difference.
Well, we'd like to lead you to Blue Chew. Boys and girls, if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? You got to go try this. Blue Chew is an online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in a chewable form. And the process is super simple. You just sign up at bluechew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door. And the best part is it's all online, which means you get to skip the doctor's office. No awkward conversations, no waiting in line at the pharmacy. This is the real deal. And if you haven't tried it already, what are you waiting for? Blue Chew wants you to have the confidence to perform at your best. So discover your options at bluechew.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code WRESTLE at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's bluechew.com. The promo code is WRESTLE, and you'll receive your first month free. Visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast. So listen, you're working on the house shows.
Did you have like a hot chick on there instead of Bruce Prichard on Blue Chew?
Probably so, but well,
he is a famous guy. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah, we're, you know what? Send your submissions to John on Twitter. And if you're not blocked, he'll see it.
That's right. That's right.
Next week.
That's right. I was working with some group the other day, and they said, "Hey, would you repost our stuff?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." You blocked us. I'd blocked them years before. I said, "You obviously said something stupid."
My gosh,
I'm blocking your social media guy for that knockout pick.
He deserves it. Shout out to Derek. He deserves it. He knows what he did. Well, we got to talk about the angle that really set it off. You sort of touched on it last week, and it's interesting that, we're talking about house shows because this happens on a house show, and it happens in Eddie's quote unquote hometown of El Paso, Texas. It was shot for television, but I do think that having it be filmed at a house show rather than all the pomp and circumstance and production of TV made it feel more real. Was that the thinking at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. You look at kind of old famous barroom scenes or fights and things that happen out of the character of the television show, like the Tupelo bar fight. It's shot from a security cam type angle. People just bought into it. We wanted to shoot it somehow in a grainy way where it didn't look produced, where people might actually buy into it that this actually happened. Yeah.
It's a homecoming. I think everybody listening to this knows that Eddie had some challenges in his life with substances, and he had lost his wife and family, and now he'd gotten them all back, and he'd become the champion, and now he's back in his hometown. I mean, this checks all the boxes. And then he's going to talk about Mother's Day and how close we are to Mother's Day. And he brings his mom into the ring in his hometown of El Paso, and nobody thinks anything of it. This is just anything of the cameras being there, I mean, because this is just, the local boy done good, and he's coming home and being celebrated. So, yeah, it makes sense that you would want to film this. And then all of a sudden, here you come from out of the back. You nail Eddie with a clothesline, and you grab his mom, and it was described in the newsletters as a Vulcan pinch to her to give the illusion of hurting her without doing anything to her. And the family's freaking out. He can't really do anything to save his mom, talking about Eddie Guerrero. And here comes some officials from backstage, and she goes out on a stretcher with the oxygen mask. And man, what a scene. If you're watching with us over on somethingtowrestle.com, we've got some stills there so you can sort of get an idea of what we're talking about. But the heat in that building, you mentioned last week, it's one thing to have them going bananas for Eddie Guerrero, but when a hush falls over a crowd, it's a different feeling, isn't it?
Completely different feeling. And I know what a Vulcan grip is, and I'm glad that they were worked into believing that was what it was attempted. What it actually was, I put my hand on her shoulder so that she could take a bump down. So I put my hand on her shoulder so that she could grab my hand and guide herself. She was 74, I believe, at the time, and guide herself down to the mat. So that was a way that it looked like I was pushing her, but really I was holding on to her, taking care of her. And last thing I was going to do, I know all the Guerrero brothers. Last thing I'm going to do is hurt Mrs. Guerrero. So yeah, it was Conrad, it's hard to describe that event for people to understand that had never been in a situation like that. When I went back out, the place got quiet because they thought something had gone wrong. And then when Miss Guerrero went down, I'm arm's length from her because I'm guiding her down. She looked like she had a heart attack. I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, is there not a Guerrero that can't work? That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, this Miss Guerrero is just fantastic. And when she goes down, it was so believable. The people in their building got quiet. I mean, they were all there for Eddie. Eddie told me later he had smartened up a few of his friends, which Eddie never smartened up anybody. But he literally thought somebody's going to knife me, or if they had a gun, shoot me, or at least jump the rail and get me. So Eddie smartened up just a few of his select friends. Bruce had state troopers, not security, state troopers around the ring to protect me because we knew this is a real potential situation. And when she went down, that place got so deathly quiet. It was eerie. And the first thing went through my mind, I thought, if I live through this, I'm the hottest heel on the freaking planet. I'm just thinking, this is the greatest things ever happened to me. It was a surreal moment. You know, I knew how dangerous it was. I knew I had to get out of the arena, and Eddie's on the ground. He goes, "S.A., get the fuck out of here." Because he knew the place was about to riot. And so I'm getting out of the ring, but I got to get it all on tape. And I knew before, he'd almost have been stabbed in Vienna, Austria was where I almost got stabbed. And Finley saved me at least from getting stabbed. You know, you turn your back on a riot, that's when people get emboldened. That's when they jump you. So I knew I couldn't turn my back on them, but I knew also I had to get it on tape. And I thought, to hell with this. You know, I think I'll live through it no matter what. I got all these state troopers around me with weapons. I feel like they're going to get me out of the building, even if things get really hairy. I didn't think I was going to die. You know, I thought I might get jumped, but it was more important to me to get the shot. And so I'm sitting there cutting this promo, and the guys around me are going, "John, would you get out of the arena, please? Please get out of the arena. The security's begging me to get out, but I don't want to look like I'm fearful. I don't want to look emboldened, guys who want to jump over the rail." So I'm sitting there, and when I see somebody about to jump, I'd point at them like that. You know, that kind of back them off a little bit and yell at them. And I knew we had to get on tape. And when I got to the back, literally my car was running. You had my stuff in the car. I got in the car with nothing but wrestling trunks and boots on, and drove out of the parking lot with a police escort. The local El Paso police gave me an escort out of the arena all the way to the city limit. They were going to drive me to Odessa, which is, I think, a couple hours. It's right up Interstate 10, where 10 turns into 20, I believe it is. And they're going to drive me all the way there. And we got outside of the city limit. We got out there so fast. It was seamless. Bruce had done a great job of getting me out of the arena that nobody followed us. So I pulled over and I told them, I say, "Guys, listen, nobody's followed us. I'm fine." They go, "Well, don't come back. We think you could be killed." And he said, "We certainly can't guarantee your safety." He said, "People are really upset at you." And I said, "Cool." I said, "Thanks, guys. Appreciate your help." And drove to Odessa. By the way, I got stopped by a border checkpoint in about 2 miles, and I'm sitting there in wrestling trunks and boots with no shirt on. and my stuff's in the back. And the guy pulls me over. He goes, "What are you doing?" And the guy's Latino, and I don't want to tell him I just gave Eddie Guerrero's mom a heart attack because I figured the guy might shoot me out here on the side of the road. So I said, I just looked at him. He goes, "Is there a reasonable explanation for you driving like this?" "I'm in trunks and boots, nothing else." And I said, "Yeah, but I don't know if you'll believe it." He goes, "Sir, just put your shirt on and just drive. I don't want to hear it." And so that's how I ended up going to Odessa.
My goodness. I got to ask, when we're hearing these reports of his mom, we're talking about Eddie's mom, we also hear that she actually got a little worked up in the ring. Like her blood pressure was elevated. I know you're getting out of there, but did you hear that people worried? Like
they didn't tell me that until a couple of days later. Yeah.
What are the details there as best you recall?
Best I recall was, the whole arena was chanting "Gory" for Gory Guerrero. She was honoring, her late husband, Eddie's dad, the legendary figure there in El Paso. The whole arena chanting "Gory, Gory, Gory." And she got emotional, as you would expect. And so when I came out, that made it a lot worse. So she had already been worked up with the emotion. And she had some problem with her heart. I mean, they thought she was legitimately having a heart attack, is what I was told. And I mean, if she legitimately had a heart attack, I'd be dead. I'd be, for one, I don't want Miss Guerrero to have a heart attack, but two, that would not have ended well for me, certainly. But yeah, I heard about it a couple of days later that she got worked up, and bless her heart. I mean, she was such a wonderful lady. just like all the Guerreros are. I can't overemphasize that enough, how great the Guerrero people are, the Guerrero family is. And she called to check on me. She's literally having this heart issue, and she wanted to make sure I got out of the arena okay. Just a wonderful lady.
How much fun did she have being involved?
I think she loved every second of it. You know, her husband was such a big star. He was a great heel. You know, Gory was a great heel, especially down in Mexico City. People loved Gory Guerrero. There's so many great stories about him. Such a great character, and she had all these wrestling boys. So after all these years of just kind of watching Eddie and Hector and the guys, their sons kind of out there, you know, Mondo's out in Hollywood. Chavo had been a huge name, made a huge name for himself. Now she's got, you know, Chavo Jr. out there. She got to be back in wrestling. And you could tell, I mean, she was like a Catholic kid meeting the Pope. You know, it was like she was 12 years old again, doing something. She was so excited. She would ask tons of questions. You knew she was going to do it right, but she wanted so badly to do things correctly. But you could tell she just was having a blast. She was out there with her baby boy Eddie. I mean, it was really cool to see the way Miss Guerrero acted around Eddie. And by the way, Vicky and her kids did a magnificent job in that as well.
Were they all cool and comfortable? I mean, is this something that there's any pushback from anybody, or is this a wrestling family and they get it?
Nope, zero pushback. And by the way, it was Chavo's idea, Chavo Sr. We were in a dressing room, and, you know, I came out as JBL, and it wasn't working. You know, people still saw me as Ron Simmons' partner. They didn't want to buy me as this guy who's going to challenge Eddie Guerrero for the championship. He just defeated Brock Lesnar. I mean, here you got this guy of the APA all of a sudden now saying he's this rich guy who's going to beat Eddie Guerrero. People didn't really care. You know, we wanted to do something, and Eddie felt like he could make anybody, as any champion would. And he really felt it strongly with me because he really liked me, and he wanted to show that he could make this match work. So we were in a house show somewhere, and Chavo and Eddie and I were the only ones in the dressing room, Chavo Sr. And Chavo came to me, and I think he got this angle from around the mid-1970s, I think, or maybe late 70s, with Roddy Piper from the Coliseum, where they brought out a donkey and they said it was Gory Guerrero and this whole family angle, and they sold the place out several times. I think that's where Chavo got it from. I'm not 100% sure on that because I never asked him. But Chavo pitches this idea to me with Eddie. He said, hey, we're coming up in El Paso, Mother's Day weekend, and we want to do this angle. And I say it's Chavo's idea. Chavo was the one talking. I'm not sure if it was him or Eddie or both, but Chavo was the one talking. And the best part about it, Conrad, was he pitches this idea, and I said, guys, this is genius. This is absolutely genius. This is going to be awesome. And then he says, and Mom can take a bump. And Eddie says, Chavo, no, Mom's not going to take a bump. And so Chavo goes, okay. And Chavo kept talking. Then he goes, and then Mom can take a bump. And Eddie goes, Chavo, Mom's not going to take a bump. And he goes, okay, listen, Eddie. He goes, how about John just hits her with like a little boot or something? Not a clothesline, but a boot. And Eddie goes, Chavo, our 74-year-old mother's not taking a bump. And now Eddie's getting hot at Chavo, and Chavo knows he's got him because he keeps and Eddie knows that Chavo's working him up. But Eddie's still getting mad at Chavo. Now they both stand up. I'm the only one in the dressing room. I got this freaking brother fight of Guerrero is about to happen in the backstage area, some live event. We're the only ones in the building. And Chavo goes, okay, Eddie, all right. Say Mom goes down, but could she get just a little color? And that's when Eddie goes, fuck you, Chavo. Mom's not doing any of that. And now they start, I thought, oh my God, they're going to fight. They're going to fight. They've been doing this since they were kids. And so I'm simply trying to separate them. I thought, they're going to turn on me eventually because they're not going to, I'm the one outsider. It was so great watching the interaction between Chavo and Eddie. So when you ask about any pushback from his family, it came from his family. This whole angle came from his family. It's one of the reasons I owe the Guerreros so much.
I'm curious, what did Vince think of what you guys had done in El Paso? I don't imagine he's at the live event, but when he sees the tape, is he as excited about it as you and Bruce and Eddie were?
Thrilled, absolutely thrilled. I mean, I couldn't have had a bigger home run. We couldn't have had a bigger home run. And the first night we had, I told you last week when Hebner punted the guy's head off his shoulders when the guy tried to come in the ring after me. As soon as that video aired, the first night we had a jumper, and we knew then. I mean, this video's changed absolutely everything. By the way, that night, Hebner's fighting the fan and beating him up pretty bad. Eddie goes after the fan, and I literally have to tackle Eddie as a shoot, and I'm holding him down. I'm going, Eddie, I'm the heel. He goes, he screwed up our match. I'm going, Eddie, I'm the heel. You cannot do this. People will not understand you beating up this fan. But after that, we knew that this was hot. And I walked in with Vince, and he goes, if I can keep you alive, he goes, we're going to do really well with this. He goes, we're going to do really well. And I said, Vince, are you more worried that I'm going to get killed or that you're going to lose your main event? He goes, oh, the main event, of course.
It's written in the Observer at the time. I think everyone realized how dead Guerrero JBL was as a pay-per-view main event. So they're going to desperate storyline links to shoot it with adrenaline. I don't know, man. That feels off base to me. Like, this feels like exactly what wrestling's supposed to be. It's blurring the lines of reality. We're getting a personal issue. I mean, that's what they used to hang in the office in Memphis, from what I've heard, is personal issues draw money. That's what this is, right?
Yeah, 100%. Dick Murdoch used to say, I call your sister a name, you call my mom a name, we fight. It's pretty freaking simple.
Yes.
And that's what it is. You know, and again, you go back to, you know, and I picked at the online guys a lot. You know, before ever pay-per-view, after, you know, I became champion, I would try to say something controversial, and they bid on it for a while. And I kind of realized, I think, that I was just trying to set them up. So I don't understand the animosity there or the angst about the angle. It's what you do in wrestling. You got to make it personal. Again, if you don't make this personal, Tyson and Jake Paul don't put 70,000 people in a building. They didn't do it. They didn't do it because they're going to have a great match. You know, Hogan and Giant didn't put 93,000 people in a building because they're going to have a great match. Depends on your definition of greatness, by the way. But Killer Tim Brooks used to always tell. I'll tell you an interesting story. First time I met a guy who we used to call him Smart Marks. I think that's a derogatory term now, but that's what we used to call him, which wasn't a derogatory back then, I don't think. But he was a newsletter guy, newsletter guy. And he told me, he said, I hate that Killer Tim Brooks. And I said, why? He goes, his work rate's terrible. And it's the first time I'd ever heard that term. And I said, what do you mean work rate? He goes, well, he doesn't have good matches. I said, so you don't like him? He goes, no, I don't like him. Forget about his character. I don't like him. And I said, okay. And he goes, I don't want to watch him wrestle. I said, so you don't like him at all? And I said, no. I said, if they brought in Stan Hansen to fight Killer, would you pay to see it? He said, I'd pay double. I said, you're right. He's not a good worker. And that, to me, explains being a heel in a nutshell. You know, Killer used to always tell me, when you take away the veneer that you're a character. Now, I'm talking about being a pure heel, not an attraction heel. There's a massive difference. When you're a pure heel and you take away that veneer that you're a character, but that you are you. And that's what people believed about me. People believed I was JBL. And that's what we wanted them to believe. And people believe that with this. And because of that, they responded, oh, that's classless. They shouldn't have done this. It's tasteless and stuff that. Because I think what we had done is take away that veneer that I wasn't playing a character. I'm just a bad guy.
Well, you're not a bad smelling guy, thanks to Mando and their whole body deodorant. I'm happy to report that I've never checked, but I know for certain that John's balls don't stink. And yours shouldn't either. Your pits, your balls, your thigh folds, your belly buttons, your butt crack, even your smelly ass feet are no more, thanks to our friends at Mando. This was created by a doctor who saw firsthand how normal BO was being misdiagnosed and mistreated. It's been clinically proven to block odor all day and even control it for up to 72 hours. They've got solid stick deodorant that's been formulated and powered by mandelic acid to stop odor before it even starts. And now they've got spray deodorant that's aluminum free and ideal for those hard to reach places. All the products are baking soda free and paraben free, and they come with a variety of fresh scents like bourbon leather, clover woods, Pro Sport, and even Mount Fuji. It's been clinically proven to control odor better than a shower with soap alone. You see, 12 hours after a shower, the average man's grundle odor level is like a 5 out of 10. But with Mando, the average grundle odor level is a 0 out of 10. And Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice. I recommend the mini body wash and the deodorant wipes. You can even get free shipping. And as a special deal for our listeners, new customers get $5 off their starter pack with our exclusive code. That's like 40% off your starter pack when you use our code STW at shopmando.com. That's SHOPMANDO.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. So, John, we're finally here. You know, you've got this big angle set for Mother's Day. We're getting this ready for Judgment Day. And this is probably, at this point, the biggest match of your entire career. Is that fair to say?
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And this is my whole career. You know, I was, I told you before, I'd be happy to have been an APA member my whole career. I was glad I got this run. But this was it in a nutshell. I knew it was a one-off. Pat Patterson told me before the match, he says, "Hey, John, I hope you do great out there." He goes, "For your sake." And he kind of let that slip at the end. Like, basically, if you don't do well, we're never going to see you again. You would not be talking to me now. I would not be anywhere if that match had not worked. And when I say I owe everything to Eddie, I owe everything to Eddie, his family, and Bruce Prichard, because those are the guys that, and Vince, and those are the guys that made this work. I worked with legendary talent that was able to get me over because of this. That was a spot we were in that was almost untenable, trying to fill in for Brock Lesnar, which I'm not saying I did. I'm just saying that's what spot I was in. A Big Show and Kurt Angle being out. I knew the odds were stacked against me, and I knew that being a one-off was the high probability that was going to happen.
Well, it wound up being a lot more than that, and a lot of it is probably because of the match. And what I remember best about this, I remember where I watched this. I remember the address I was at, the people I was watching it with. It was a spectacle that we had never seen before in WWE. And I want to know, earlier in the day, is that what you guys aimed to do? Did you know it was going to be a bloodbath before you even got in there?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. We didn't know it was going to be that bad. Obviously, no one knew it was going to be that bad. But we knew it was going to be. And a couple things led up to that. First of all, Pat Patterson came in, who's one of the greatest agents in the history of the world, and he gave us this whole finish. And I'm watching Eddie, and Eddie was a guy who could not talk over a finish in the back, not because he wasn't intelligent. He was very smart, but because it was all feel to Eddie. Eddie's one of those guys, that you talk about two different things. Talk about story and you talk about match. Eddie's one of those few guys that could deliver both. Most guys can't. Most guys can deliver one or the other. Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle, Undertaker. There's a bunch of guys like that, but not that many. Eddie could deliver both. So Pat's going over this finish, and it was a really good finish, but I could watch Eddie, and Eddie didn't feel it. He knew he had a lot of heat. He knew he wanted to feel what the crowd was buying. So when Pat walked out, I asked Eddie, I said, "Eddie, what do you not like?" He said, "None of it." And I said, "You don't like any of it?" He said, "No, no." So I went to Pat, and I said, "Pat, it's one of those things where you always preface it with, 'I need to talk to you.' It's serious." And I said, "Pat, I need to talk to you." And he goes, "What is it?" And I said, "Pat," I said, "Eddie's not feeling it." And Pat said, "Which part?" I said, "Any of it." And he goes, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Can we call the whole thing out there?" And Pat said, "The whole thing." And I'm talking about the finish too. And he said, "Guys, if you succeed or if you fail, it's on you, not on me." He said, "I'll still be here." He said, "If you fail, you won't be. And if you make it," he said, "I hope you do." He said, "You do what you think's best for you."
Wow.
So we didn't have even a finish, Conrad. We didn't have a finish. We had nothing, zero planned. So I knew that we had heat. I knew when we got out there, and Eddie came to me right before the match, not right before, it was a few hours before, and he had this freaking dagger. It looked like one of these swords back here. He had this dagger, and we used to call them business blades. Business blade. Black Bart used to always say, "I got a business blade. I got a business blade." And people would make a dagger occasionally. Gary Hart was the one that came up with that because he used to carry Sweet Lucy in the bottom of his cigarette case in case a fan got too rambunctious. Gary had Sweet Lucy. It was a business blade. And Eddie had this freaking dagger. I mean, dagger. And he goes, "Essay." He goes, "Last time I juiced, I got so much scar tissue up here." He goes, "It didn't work." He goes, "I'm going to get good color today." I said, "Holy shit, Eddie, that's a sword." And he gave one of them to little Hebner because, the worst thing in the world is when you need a juice and you drop a blade, or get it kicked out of your hand. Like, that can happen. I had that happen in Europe one time. I went to juice and Franz Schumann by mistake and kicked my hand. The damn thing, blade goes out. So I had told him to hard way me, which, it's last thing you want to do is just have some guy bust you open. But he had an extra blade in Hebner's pocket, which cut his leg all up, and Hebner was being careful with it. I mean, it was a dagger that Eddie had, and he called it a business blade, which is the old term in the business. Yeah. And I knew he was going to get good color. I had no idea it was going to be that much, but we knew it was going to be a bloodbath.
I'm fascinated with the idea that you guys were calling it in the ring. I do want to follow up on something you said, though. I know what you mean when you say, "Hey, we didn't have a finish." Some of our listeners are going to be confused and think you mean we didn't know who was going to win or lose. Oh, you're not suggesting that, but just the finishing sequence that leads to who goes over or who loses or whatever. That's what you're talking about, right?
That's right. Yeah. No, not to intimate in any way that it was a shooter, and absolutely not. We knew it was going to be a DQ. We didn't know how we were going to do it, and we knew about what time we were going to do it. We didn't know how we were going to do it. I had some ideas in my head. I have no doubt that Eddie had ideas in his head. People always ask you, when you have a veteran in there, especially the heel usually calls the match. When you got somebody like Eddie, who's a veteran who's so fantastic, it's kind of a mutual thing you're calling. It's kind of hard to explain, but I would call a lot of stuff that I was doing, then Eddie would call a lot of things that he wanted to do. And if somebody said they wanted to do something, obviously they had something in mind, and that would supersede what you had, and you would go with it. It's kind of like two ad-lib comedians is the best way to explain it. Standing on stage and kind of going whichever direction they think that the audience tells them. So, yeah, we did have we knew what the finish was going to be. It was going to be a DQ, and we knew about what time it was going to be, but we didn't know how we're going to get there.
Are you having a conversation with Vince ahead of time, letting him know that you're calling it out there, or is it all just you and Pat and Eddie making that
Nope,
decision?
just me and Pat. From what I remember, didn't have one conversation with Vince about it. It was all Pat, and Pat felt comfortable with it. I'm sure Pat relayed the message, and Vince knew how big a deal it was to us, and that we obviously felt comfortable with it. Vince was a guy that if you said, I want to do this, I know I can do it, Vince would give you the opportunity.
Is this the bloodiest match you've wrestled in at that point?
No doubt about it. And I didn't realize how much blood there was until later when I look back at it. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't realize how much blood was actually coming out of Eddie. It was unbelievable watching the thing back. Eddie, at one point, he told me, he goes, good juice essay. I said, my blade's still on my wrist, you bastard. I hadn't pulled my blade out yet, and Eddie had busted me open with, I think, the title belt or something. And he just laughed. He thought it was funny. He goes, I got you. He's covered in blood. He's laughing because he had busted me open.
It's written in the Observer, Guerrero bladed, and that's hardly the word. It was coming out of his forehead like a faucet. When you're in the match and you see it coming out, you said you didn't realize until afterwards how much was coming out. So you didn't reconcile that he might actually be in a dangerous place here.
No, I didn't think he was. And I was talking to him the whole time. Now, I don't think he remembered part of the finish, but could have been the chair shot as well. We played rough back then. Yeah. And, people say, unprotected chair shots. That's how we did all of them. It was no different. I did the same return for him just a month later in the pay-per-view. Eddie was talking to me out there. So I didn't think he was in any danger of not making the match, of being incoherent. If I had said something, he didn't understand it, or if he had said something to me that made sense, that didn't make sense, I would have raised the red flag to Hebner about it. But there, at no point did I feel like Eddie was in trouble. And I know with all the blood stuff, that sounds crazy. I was talking to him out there the whole time. I'd been in a lot of matches with him. I never felt like Eddie was in danger.
The catalyst, of course, for the blood is the big chair shot. It's written that it is a sick chair shot to the head. Of course, we didn't know back then what we know now, and this would never happen today. But where does this rank in your all-time chair shots? I mean, we've seen some pretty brutal ones for you. Where is this one?
This is about one of the hardest ones I've given, but I've given a lot the same. I hit Bubba Dudley with one like this, and Bubba hit me one like this. Undertaker hit me with a chair shot one time in Japan in Budokan Hall, and he started cussing me because I didn't put my hands up. That one that Maven took was nothing compared to what I took, and Maven took a shot, brother. So we just played rough back then, and that's what we did. We didn't put our hands up. We played rough. We didn't know how bad concussions were. So a different era. But as far as a chair shot, we knew that was the seminal point of the match. We knew that was the most important thing we would do in that match, was that chair shot. Both of us knew that. And Eddie told me, if I'd done anything different, Eddie would have been furious with me. So Eddie knew it was coming. I knew I was going to whack him with it. And all I want to do is make sure and hit him flat with the chair surface without the bottom rim or anything where I bust him open. Yeah. And I hit him about as square as you can hit him with that chair. There's no way to take that. I mean, that's a concussion waiting to happen, but back then that's what we did.
Of course, this all happens after the ref has been bumped. When a cover is about to be made, here comes referee Charles Robinson to make the save. At this point, though, I mean, after Eddie's really bleeding, it's written by Dave Meltzer. By this point, the ring was like a canvas after a red paint explosion. I mean, what a descriptive term, but you've seen some of the images here at somethingtowrestle.com. And if you haven't seen this match before, I highly recommend that you go watch it. This is an incredible performance by both JBL and, of course, Eddie Guerrero. When we get to the actual finish, though, you're going to go for the fall-away slam. Eddie reverses it into a DDT. He's going to miss a frog splash. You bring the belt in. Hebner's distracted. Eddie gets it. He uses the belt on you in front of Hebner, and that's the DQ. The only thing that's weird about this match is, as great of a spectacle as it is that there's not a clean finish. Do you wish in hindsight there would have been?
I don't think so. I don't know. I think it'd be great to have a clean finish, and I certainly wouldn't have minded putting Eddie over. I would have been happy to. We knew we were trying to get to something further, and the only way to do that, I think, was to not have a clean finish. If Eddie beat me in this one off, then the angle's over. I've taken the place of all these guys I mentioned, and they're trying to build me to be this credible guy. And if I get beat, I think the angle's over, especially when he bled.
I would argue you should have won, John. I mean, I would argue that you should have won this. Like, if we're trying to make a new guy and we see how bloody Eddie is, now if it looks like you've cheated to win this, you gave his mom a heart attack, you bloodied him, and now you stole his belt. When he starts pouring, well, I just assumed, oh my God, JBL's going to win this thing, but they didn't do it here. Do you think they should have?
I think I think it could have been a good idea. I think yes. I think it could have been a good idea to put the belt on me then. I don't think there's any doubt about that because they put me on the belt on me the next pay-per-view. So yes, I think it would have made more sense to do it then. I think this was the insurance policy in case I sucked.
Okay.
I mean, I think this was Vince saying, we don't know for sure if John's going to be our guy.
Yeah.
And so he put the title on me. You're stuck with me. And all of a sudden now you've done something. Say the match was bad and they put the title on me. And all of a sudden you got this champion you really don't want. And so I think knowing all the politics backstage of me being totally new to that main event level, I think it was the right decision. Now, if they'd have known that JBL had gone on for the next year and been champion, I think that's the time he sort of switched the title.
It's interesting to think back about what happens in the post-match because Eddie gets another chair shot. He hits you with the frog splash. He's destroying you with the belt. It is a main event spectacle. It's written here in the Observer. This was really quite an awesome spectacle, reminiscent of an old school Mexico main event with Perro Aguayo coming back after bleeding all over the place, and the place was buzzing. He gave it 3 3/4 stars, and the cover story in the Observer is that Judgment Day as a pay-per-view needed a home run going into the main event. And you guys responded with one of the bloodiest matches in company history. But here's the report that I want your take on. When the night was over, the ring was filled with puddles of Guerrero blood, and Guerrero himself, after the adrenaline wore off, went into shock and had to be rushed to the hospital in an ambulance due to excessive blood loss. And after the television cameras went off, he collapsed in the ring from blood loss, had to be helped backstage. An ambulance was called. It took 16 stitches in the forehead from the ridiculously deep cut. At the hospital, they suggested him getting a blood transfusion, but he turned it down, and they pumped 2 bags of fluid into him before letting him go around 1 a.m. in the morning. He didn't wrestle the house show the next night in Palm Springs, but he did come out of it okay and is expected to wrestle this coming weekend. Do you remember all this? Was that real? Did he really go to the hospital?
I think he went to the hospital. Yeah, he was worried about the blood loss. He wasn't in shock. I was with him the whole time. He was upset, and maybe you can call it shock. Maybe that's the medical term, but Eddie was not. There was not a time where he passed out, or to my knowledge, I don't. If he was working in the ring. It was when he came to the back. He was coherent. He was mad, and I think he probably had a concussion and all that blood loss. There was a lot going on there, and they called when I went there to see him. They say, come see Eddie. He won't go to the hospital. And I said, okay. So I went in there and Eddie was refusing to go. And I walked in and Eddie just changed his tune completely. It was wild. Eddie and I never had a cross word. He got into a fight with almost everybody he faced as a worker, except for me, which I'm thankful of. But when I walked in there, I said, hey, Essay. He goes, hey, Essay, great match. I said, Eddie, they need you to go to the hospital. He goes, okay. And that was it. He agreed to go. He did go to the hospital. I think Chavo went with him, I believe. But there wasn't I was sitting there talking to him. I don't think it was. Unless you can classify it somehow medically different as shock. Bruce may have a different. Bruce was there as well. Maybe Bruce has a different opinion, but I didn't think it was shock.
When you come back through the curtain after a performance like that, what's Gorilla like? I mean, it's the end of the night, so I'm sure a lot of the guys have already gone to the next town. But what's going on when you walk through the curtain? It's your first main event. You had to be feeling the adrenaline out there. When you come through the curtain, were you disappointed with the reaction, or what was the reaction?
No, nowadays it's different. So back in the day, you go through the curtain, people weren't all there to high five you and tell you how great you are. Vince would talk to you if you wanted to, or Bruce would if you wanted to, and you'd greet your opponent and you'd leave. Nowadays, there's the parade. You come back from the curtain, you go over and you get an acknowledgement. You go over and say, how was it? and so you want somebody to tell you how great you are and all that stuff. That's really changed. I see that now, and now they get feedback, so that can be good. I'm not bashing what's going on now, but back then people expected you to have a good match. Not that they don't now. I'm not bashing these young kids now, but people expected you to have a good match. I remember I walked back, Dan Madigan was there, and he goes, "That was the greatest thing I've seen." He goes, "Oh my God, it was so bloody." We knew it was going to be bloody, and we wanted it to be bloody. Maybe not that bloody, but we wanted it to be bloody. And Vince came up and hugged me. I had blood all over me. He hugged me. I saw him do the same thing one time with Shawn Michaels. I thought it was cool, so he did it with me. I thought it was cool too. And then Eddie came back. I said, thank you. And Eddie got something to drink. When he get something to drink, all the blood of his head poured into this cooler where all the drinks were, so nobody else could get anything to drink the rest of the night. But it was completely different back then when he came backstage. There wasn't a welcome party for you to, assuage your ego and tell you how great you are, give you feedback. It was just, guys expect you to go out there and wrestle.
Well, I'm not talking about the other performers as much as I was Vince, because I know this had to be a real test, for him and for you. Like, he wants you to succeed. You want to succeed, but both of you are like, is it going to work? Shit, I don't know. I'm going to try my best. And then when you come through, I mean, I'm not trying to be that guy, but you got to be looking for, what did Vince think, right? Is he
Yeah. It's a side eye look. It's a side eye look we used to always have. You walk in and you want to see if Vince wants to see you or not, but you don't really want to look at him because you don't want to beg. You don't want to beg for approval. So everybody who comes back wants feedback. I don't mean to diminish the young guys today come back expecting feedback. We wanted it too. We just didn't get it. And so I did come back, and Vince was there waiting for me. Told me he thought it was amazing. Very happy with it. And that made me feel good. I felt like we had hit a home run. I really felt like we had done well. And when I came back and Vince told me that, and I saw Dan Madigan there, he told me the same thing. Bruce said the same thing. Pat did. I felt really, really good about it. And then Eddie had to get stitched up and all that. And, so the emphasis shifted of what we were doing.
This is before, everybody's got an iPhone. So, we're not getting as many text messages or social media or things like that. But when you come back after a match like that, this is your first main event. Is your voicemail on your phone full from people that in your real life who are calling to give you an attaboy, or is that not the way the business was back then?
No, it wasn't. Business wasn't that way back then. I don't even know I got one message. I'm sure I got a message, from my wife, but that was about it. I guess we were married at the time. Maybe been engaged, but I didn't get to my knowledge, I didn't get one message. The boys didn't do that back then. Now it's different, and I actually like it now. I send guys messages all the time after a match, or something, or a promo, or they see them on TV about how good they did. It's different now, but back then guys just didn't put each other over like that.
It just feels like to me, and I get it's a different time, it's a different era, but as a fan, I want to think that, Ron Simmons left you a voicemail, or The Undertaker's like, dude, you did it, or whatever. But
now in fairness, I believe Taker was there that night, so Taker would have said something. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I also wish that these days that guys knew to just reach for those topicals from theamazingkind.com. It's good for what ails you. I don't know if it would have helped Eddie Guerrero's boo-boo that night, but he'd have been feeling a little better. I'm a big believer in CBD products, and I hope you will be too. If you haven't already, I want you to go check them out at theamazingkind.com. They've got CBD, CBG, and CBN. CBN will help you sleep. CBG will help you focus, and CBD will just help you reduce that anxiety and help you relax. Of course, we can also talk about the topicals, and that's really what Eddie and John probably needed that night. Athletes and fitness enthusiasts can use these CBD topicals to aid in muscle recovery. It helps after a workout, or if you just got something on you that's giving you a little trouble in the morning. It can even help with your skin conditions like acne or psoriasis and even eczema. And if you've got chronic pain conditions, like there's a lady at the office, Frances, you've heard me talk about before. She suffers from migraines. The Amazing Kind really helps her. All you do is you take these CBD topicals and you just massage them into the skin. It's going to promote relaxation and stress relief in the treated area. It even has anti-inflammatory properties. And yes, of course, localized pain relief for your sore muscles, your joint pain, any inflammation you may have. I'm a big believer in the Amazing Kind, and you will be too. They're a longtime sponsor here on the show, and the guy is one of us. The founder used to work in the wrestling business. He was a producer and an editor for the WWE. He helped work on their commercials and marketing. And then he started this family-owned business, The Amazing Kind. They specialize in plant-based pain relief balms, creams, and gels for all of your muscles and joints, but also those infused oils for mood support and sleep. Their products are of the highest quality. They've been sourced from GMP certified manufacturers. They're tested for quality and purity. You're going to be sure you get exactly what it says on the label. And right now you can get 20% off your entire order at theamazingkind.com if you use our promo code WRESTLE. Use that promo code WRESTLE at theamazingkind, that's KIND, and you'll get 20% off your entire order at theamazingkind.com. So listen, man, now that you've got the bloodbath over, we got to keep this thing going. And of course, this was.
Yep. And hey, Conrad, let me say one other thing. People talk about the match, and I heard you and Bruce talk about it, and I don't disagree with anything you guys said, especially what Bruce said. There was too much blood. Vince said there was too much blood. He didn't tell me that, by the way. He was very thankful for what we did and very thankful for the amount of blood that we were willing to spill for him and for the company. It may have been too much, but look at what we were up against. Eddie had vouched for me. His reputation was on the line. He's a new champion. He's a small champion. He's 240 pounds, but small, to WWE standards, especially back then, the great big champions, especially following Brock Lesnar. I knew it was a one-off if it didn't work. I mean, I knew we had to do something epic. And so was it too much blood? Yeah, it could have been, but you wouldn't be talking about it today like we talk about it if there's anything to changed. I mean, that changed the whole dynamic of everything. So I certainly don't regret the amount of blood that was out there, and Eddie didn't either. We knew we needed something epic, and we did it.
Let's talk about June. The next month, you guys are going to be on a flight. You're going to be working some international shows. You're going to be in Germany, and Eddie is over like Rover, huge in Munich. Heroes welcome. But the next night, he didn't get a bigger reaction than The Undertaker. And maybe there were a few fans who weren't sold on Eddie Guerrero being in the top spot. And a few fans start to chant, Eddie sucks. Eddie apparently snaps. This is too much for him. And he gets the mic and says, Eddie doesn't suck. Germany sucks. And he tries to work as a heel for the rest of the match. And this was written about in the Observer as being unprofessional. That was the report they were hearing from people inside the company that, he had sort of, maybe he had been gotten to by these fans. You were there. What can you tell us about this? Were you just over like Rover back from the Otto days, or what's going on here?
Big Show loves to tell the story. We wrestled in Germany one time, and Big Show, I had done all promotion for there. I'd worked for Otto, and I said, hey, Big Show. And Big Show goes, hey, they're going to take me as the baby face. I said, okay, no problem. I didn't tell Big Show that I'd been doing publicity for the whole tour. I'd worked for Otto over there. When I got up for Big Show was there, I cut a promo in German, telling the German people how much I love him. The first punch, I just took a bump. I said, I'm going to sell on I'm Ricky Morton. He goes, you bastard. So, yeah, I felt very comfortable in Germany because I'd worked there so much. That story is 100% not true. 100%. There's nothing about that story that was written that's true. Not one thing. What happened was the night before, I'd done the Nazi salute in the ring. And by the way, I wasn't the only one that did it that night. I'm the only one that got reported. I just signed a deal with CNBC. So, I had some guys trying to cause some trouble, which they did for me for CNBC. They sent 3 emails to CNBC. I've seen them and, ended up getting me fired. And it was a big deal with WWE, and guys here's the thing about that, not to digress a little bit. Guys had done that Nazi salute over there for so many years. Nobody cared. Half our heel roster had done that in the ring. WWE rings, by the way, which people don't talk about. Nobody cared. So when I did it, there wasn't any heat. People see it now and go, oh, my God, how dare you do something like that? How dare you do something Fritz von Erich and Baron von Raschke made a living off of? Now, I understand they did it here, but every heel that went over to Germany did it. And it wasn't a big deal. But the fallout from it was a big deal. So they got on to me about it. They really read me the riot act. I'm like, guys, I didn't say this, but I'm not even the only one that did it last night. You didn't read the riot act to anybody else, just me. Because I was the only one reported, and I wasn't going to stooge anything else. And so I bore the brunt of all of the heat, and I had no problem with that. Eddie had a problem with it. So the next night when Eddie came out, he was furious about me taking heat off that. Furious. Okay. So when Eddie came out the next night, he cut the heel promo on the Germans. Eddie did the Nazi salute in the ring, which nobody talks about because people don't want to, they want to put all the heat on me, which is fine. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, you're a heel. I get it.
I'm a heel. I have no problem with that. Eddie turned heel. I'm sitting there across and going, what are you doing? And he goes, Essa, you're not the only one going to get heat. And he wanted to show the office that he was going to do it too. That was Eddie sticking up
for you.
Eddie was standing up for me. He was sticking up. That's 100%. He was sticking up to all of his butt. It had nothing to do with Eddie sucks chance. I didn't hear one of those. I'm not saying they didn't happen. I did not hear one Eddie sucks chant. But the reason Eddie cut the heel promo was because I'd gotten the heat over that Nazi salute the night before. Eddie cuts the heel promo the next night and then does the Nazi salute back and forth across the ring. And I'm sitting there watching him going, this match is going to be real easy. So it was so bad that Dean Malenko was the agent. He thought Eddie was going to drop the title to me, which I would have never let happen. And Eddie did not even consider doing it. But Eddie was so furious that, I mean, guys were worried about what he was going to do next, but he was sticking up for me. So that's a story about why he did it. 100% not true. What I'm telling you is what happened.
Listen, I know that everything we say on this show sometimes can get clipped up and posted out of context and on all that. I know this sounds silly, but I do feel like in 2024 we need to say John is not a Nazi supporter. My goodness, he was getting heat 20 years ago, doing what wrestlers have done forever. But John, nor Bruce, nor myself are Nazi supporters. What are we?
It's crazy. You got to say that.
Yes.
You know, and the thing was, when I did the Nazi salute in Germany, which I say people, that sounds crazy. Clip that out and put it out there, which probably somebody will.
Right. It sounds
somebody will, and they put the clip. You know, me doing. So I'm giving somebody an idea right now. I could care less. If I hadn't been canceled by now, I'll never be canceled. So I do that in Germany. People had been doing that in Germany for decades. In Germany, in German rings, WWE talent had been doing it. I could list the number of talent. I would never do it because I don't want them to get the heat I get.
Yes.
But I can tell you the number of talent. You would be. It was half our freaking roster had done it, and you're not making fun. You're not sticking up for the Germans. You're making fun of the Germans. You know, when I came back to work, you know, I was somewhere on a TV show, and a guy said, "Hey, man, as a Jew, I wish you hadn't done that." I go, "I'm sticking up for you. I'm making fun of the Germans, but I'm not want to get into the whole thing about, you know, what it was about. I'm making fun of the Germans for doing something, the same that Fritz von Erich and Baron von Raschke made a living off of, but it didn't get any heat. So you know, the fallout from it was worth it. Doing it itself was not.
Yeah, it is fascinating that people misconstrue that. Like, it's bad guys doing it over there. Not to say, look, I'm like you guys. We're
Right.
together. It's
Right.
no, it's not a vow of solidarity. It's to make you hate him even more. It's silly. But the narrative out there was Guerrero was said to be exhausted from the travel, not in the best shape physically because of the blood loss at the pay-per-view. And as noted almost every other week, he's physically hurting so bad. But in this position, he feels the pressure, like he's got to keep going. And there's the pressure of playing to bad houses as he's the top guy, even though no one blames him. So the narrative in the newsletter was, boy, he snapped on that fan and said, Eddie doesn't suck, Germany sucks, because he was cracking under the pressure of being champion. So all these years later, 20 years later, to have the context of, no, he snapped out of solidarity for you to stand up for you, man, that frames it in a whole new light.
Yeah, Eddie was sticking up for me. It was a really cool thing that he did. When he did it at the time, I thought, what a wonderful dude. You know, I knew how great it was. But the problem was then we had to wrestle the match. He had just turned heel against the heel. And so he had to wrestle the match. The crowd now has no idea who to cheer, who to boo. You know, they still want to be with Eddie. Thank God most of them didn't understand English. And so they didn't really know what he said. And the Nazi salute, they may have thought that he was somehow making fun of me or something because people loved Eddie. So, but the match was pretty tough after that. But it was 100%. It was Eddie sticking up for me. It had nothing to do with anything that was mentioned in the newsletter.
What an incredible performer Eddie Guerrero is will never be debated. But as a matter of preference, did you prefer his work as a babyface or a heel?
Babyface, because he was so, you know, I think so. You know, working with him, I didn't get to work with him as a heel. I would love to have. I thought him against Ray was
Unbelievable.
Different level. Most guys can't be good both. You know, I was not a good babyface, pretty good heel, but Eddie was great both. And it's unbelievable you're even having that debate. Shawn Michaels was great both. Kurt Angle was great both. I mean, few guys can do that. There aren't very many. But Eddie was such a good, fiery babyface that, man, when he'd do stuff out there, it was just magic. He once called a spot with me. We're in the ring, and he goes, backdrop me on the table. We're in the ring. I'm like, how do I backdrop this guy on the table? Anyway, he did some arm drag drop, something. All of a sudden, I end up by the table, like 2 minutes later, and I thought, this is the spot he called. You got to be kidding me. This guy's freaking Einstein. How did he get from there to here? And all of a sudden I backdrop him on the table, unexpected and uncalled. And he did things that were incredible. And Eddie as a babyface was just, it was unparalleled.
We got to talk about what's next. You guys are going to start doing some fun stuff on TV, but maybe it's a little comedy. And I think that's interesting because we started with some comedic elements of, him switching the trophy out that Kurt Angle was giving you. But it does feel like once it goes to blood, like it did on the pay-per-view, it's hard to walk it back. But when he steals your hat, this is fun stuff. What can you tell us about that segment?
I had a stunt hat and I had a stunt suit because of wrestling Eddie so much. And something always happened to me. So he steals my hat. I fill it up with stuff all around the ring and do all kinds of crazy stuff. Eddie was so entertaining. He was, like I say, it's hard to have both. You talk about people that can create drama and you talk about people that can have these incredible, the catchphrase 5-star matches. Eddie was one of those few guys that could do both. And Eddie was so good at the drama and the storytelling. And it was so fun to be out there with him because you had no idea what he was going to do. And he didn't care what you did because he knew he could play off of it. It was a lot of fun being out there with him.
Let's talk about the next match that you guys are going to be heading to. It's the bull rope match. And we've talked about this recently with Bruce this past summer. It's 21 minutes and 6 seconds. The rules are you've got to touch all 4 corners, and they've got lights, and they've got, different color for each guy. And when you touch a corner, well, there's a new touch, and there's the light. There's not going to be any pinfalls or submissions. And as Bruce says, he actually picked up the phone and gave a call to Dusty Rhodes to help with this finish. What do you remember about this bull rope match with Eddie Guerrero?
I remember I saw your thing with Bruce about how Bruce hated the lights. I think that was my idea because Otto Vance had done that because Otto Vance was worried about explaining a bull rope match to the German people that had never seen it before. And I said, this might help us. And so I certainly got blamed for it from Bruce. I thought it helped. I don't know. I don't know if you needed it or not, but going into the match, I'd had a lot of bull rope matches. Bull rope matches are hard. There's not that much you can do. You're tied together. You got to go a certain way in and out of the rope, in and out of the ring. It can be very tough unless you got a guy like Eddie. The old matches where you'd have 2 guys tied together, me and Black Bart, and just sit there and hit each other with a bunch of stuff and juice a bunch. That's what we used to do. Eddie was completely different. I was very excited to have this bull rope match. The finish that Bruce had, I don't know if it worked. I don't know if I could. Bruce wanted to cut the rope, which is something I think Dusty had done. Cut the rope and me win by that. I had done this finish before, so I knew it very well. I'd had, good Lord, I don't know how many bull rope matches. And Vince didn't like the finish, apparently. And so he said, call Dusty. And so Dusty was working for TNA, I think, or Impact, something. Anyway, he's working for a different company. And Dusty was out doing a shoot, and Dusty gave us the finish. So, yeah, that was a 100% Dusty finish. I thought it worked out great.
That day, you guys are not going on last. It's for the world title. You're going to win the world title. But after that is when we see the Dudleys versus The Undertaker with Paul Bearer in a concrete crypt. One of the most wrestle crap moments in the history of WWE. And I think they probably felt like when they saw it on paper, hey, we just did this with John and Eddie. We got to close with something else. Undertaker's this big established star for decades at this point. We'll put them on last. Had they known now what they knew then, they certainly would have closed with you guys. Did you go out there with a chip on your shoulder like, okay, Undertaker, follow this?
Yeah, 100%. All of us did. You go for the championship and you think, I'm going to give him something. Not against Undertaker. Undertaker did it, when I was on last for the championship, he'd always give us something we couldn't follow. And so guys always did that. Follow this. You want to follow this, better get a pine box, as the Killer used to say. I'm talking about Jerry Lee Lewis. Guys used to always say stuff like that. Nobody knew how bad the stunt guy was that played Paul Bearer. He said he could hold his breath for like 4 minutes, and he got in the concrete mesh and wanted out like in 10 seconds or something. It was absolutely horrible, but nobody knew it would be.
The finish is interesting because it looks like Eddie has won. Of course, you've touched 3 corners. Eddie's touched 3 corners. He's going to leapfrog you to touch the 4th corner. Angle's going to come out and reverse it, though, and say, no, actually, you touched it first. And when the fans realize that you lost the title, Eddie gets a big reaction out of appreciation. But now you're the champ at Great American Bash 2004. It got 3.25 stars in the Observer, and this is what was written. The title change to JBL was a relatively recent decision. It was McMahon's decision as much to get the belt off Guerrero as there was a feeling it was time for a heel champion to be chased. While Guerrero is far more popular than JBL amongst most of the wrestlers, the reaction we got was negative to the decision. From a box office standpoint, it really didn't matter at this point. JBL's character has been brought on strongly by McMahon from the start. Michael Hayes and Bruce Prichard were also said to be strong advocates of JBL as champion. When do you find out, hey man, last month was your first pay-per-view, but in your second one, you're the big dog now. You're winning the big belt. Do you find out that day or ahead of time?
No, I found out. I don't remember the exact day I found out. I remember the day Vince decided it was in Chicago. And I'd come out, I'd just been fired from CNBC, and Vince tried to get me to keep my job. He, told him so many different things. Vince couldn't get it done. They were a corporate business, and they ended up firing me. And so when I come out, they'd have JBL got fired signs. I want to actually have a JBL got fired shirt. I actually asked Vince if he'd put that out, and he thought it wouldn't last long enough that people were saying that the shirt would be, a big enough seller, because he thought it'd blow over too quick. Yeah. So I go out in Chicago, and this is the first time I've addressed the crowd. And Vince calls me into his office. He goes, "What are you going to say?" And I gave him an idea. Vince didn't give me any feedback whatsoever as far as change this or change that. He didn't want me to pick up my phone and tell the head of CNBC to call me. You didn't even have the guts to call me. I did it, which I didn't mean to disobey him. It happened when I'm out there doing the promo. I just pulled the phone out. Thought, shit, I've got it out now. I got to say it. Sounds crazy, but it wasn't a disobedience to Vince. It was, but it wasn't planned. And anyway, Vince was standing backstage and watched me. And I swore I'd never apologize for anything I did, especially as a heel. I'm not going to come out and beg your approval and say, "Oh, that was a storyline." Give me a freaking break. I'm either a heel or not. It's either a work or it isn't. That's what people don't understand. They say, "Oh, that's over the line. It's crass." How about people cutting off people's heads in Walking Dead or Games of Thrones? That's pretty over the line too. It's either a work or it isn't. I went out there and cut this promo that was from the heart, that told people I'm not apologizing. I said the line, I said, calling me anything but a great American is like calling Mother Teresa a prostitute. And when I walked out, Vince told the person who's standing next, he goes, "Do I need to put the title on him?" And the person next to him said, "Yes, you think?" And so from that point forward, Vince had it changed. It put in Vince's mind they're going to put the title on me. And I don't know when exactly he told me, but that was, you can look it up on the, I'm sure the internet has it, how far advanced that was. But right after that, Vince told me he's putting the title on me.
It's fascinating to think about how this is going to, in a weird way, you were there just to, be a big heel for Eddie. You're there to enhance Eddie's run. And after 2 matches, hey, it's your turn with the title. Do you remember having a conversation with Eddie? Was he disappointed? Did he feel like he had failed as champion when they're taking the belt off of him, or what was his reaction?
No, Eddie was so happy. And this is crazy to say. His dream is being a champion. And he gave me the storyline that took the title off him. That's unbelievable what he did for me. I mean, because he made me succeed to the level that they took the title off of him and put it on me. And he was fine with it. He would only find that. He was happy with that. He kept telling me, he said, "Essay, you're going to be great. You're going to be wonderful. I'm going to continue to help you." Eddie used to call me all times of day and night and give me ideas for storylines. He called me one night. He goes, "Essay, I got something for you. Tell them my ancestors come over here in a boat, not an inner tube." I just started laughing. "Eddie, you're going to get me killed." He goes, "No, I say good heat, good heat, good heat." He'd always say good heat. I say good heat. Eddie used to give me ideas all the time. It was remarkable. He was the most selfless guy that I've ever been around. And he was genuinely happy. I can't judge his heart, but he was genuinely happy for me getting the title from him, which took his dream away and put it on me. Not that, your dream ends with that. I think he would have ended up getting it back if he had lived. Which is unfortunate, because I wish he would have had a second run, because I think he would have even been better. But Eddie was very happy about it.
When you think back, I mean, we just talked last week about, you first coming to work for the company back in 1995. You're getting that phone call and thinking, "Hey, is this a rib?" And now fast forward, here you are 9 years later. You've been every incarnation, multiple versions of a tag team run with Wyndham and then later with Ron as the APA and of course the Acolytes. But now you've seemingly beat the final level. You're the world champ. You've won the world title. I know that a lot of guys think, "Oh, it's just a prop." Other guys say, "No, it was one of the more important days of my career." Where did winning the title register for you at the time? And now do you feel differently with the benefit of hindsight looking back on it?
I told my grandfather when I was a kid, one of my youngest memories watching the Von Erichs wrestle, and it was before the boys debuted with just Fritz, that one day I was going to be a wrestling world champion. That was my goal in life. And, when I won that title, I don't want to get sentimental here about, what I thought, but I thought, man, I wish my grandfather was alive to see this, because I told him, almost 30 something years ago that this was going to happen. And it was one of the coolest moments of my life. I couldn't believe it. You work so hard and you want to be that guy. You don't know if you can be that guy or not. And when you get the title, you still don't know if you can be that guy. You just know you're the guy at the time. And it was just hard to believe, that after all these years, I think I appreciated it more because I didn't get it early. And because I did have, went through so many iterations. And then all of a sudden this thing comes out of the blue. Man, I loved every second of that run. I loved every second of it. It was so cool to get something that you wanted since you were a kid that you thought was important. And you can talk about whether it's a prop or not, but I don't care. You get something that you want your whole life. It's very meaningful to a person that gets it.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that's the way I would imagine, it would be, as someone who I know that it's make believe and it's story and all that, but at the same time, like, there is a responsibility that comes with it. I mean, we've been talking about how Eddie felt the pressure of being in that spot. And we've all heard as fans that once upon a time, Vince wanted to have a great, close personal relationship with the champion. We've heard that he was in constant communication with the Hulk Hogans and the Bret Harts and that sort of thing, because you're the face that runs the place. So we've heard that there becomes a bond because you're speaking with Vince all the time. Were you already on that sort of level with Vince at this point? Or did that become more of a priority for you guys to communicate now that you're the champ?
I don't know if it became more of a priority. Vince communicated more with me. Vince is very Machiavellian in the fact that, he does what is needed at the time. And it doesn't mean that he doesn't appreciate the other guys, but, when you're out of sight, you're out of mind, because Vince has so many moving parts that he has to deal with. And all of a sudden I'm the guy. And so, I was in constant contact with Vince, and it was really cool that the day after, I remember it was the week after I won the championship, I went on the media tour like you always do. Vince opened up kind of the keys to the kingdom to me. And he goes, listen, when you go on the media, he said, go on there. And he said, make them love you. Tell them how nice they are, how nice they look. Tell them everything, backstage. And he said, when you're on air, just be the nice, wonderful guy. He said, so when you leave, that host or hostess is going to say, man, that JBL, what a nice guy he is. And he said, because fans will look at it and go, no, he's not. He's a fake. He's a fraud. We hate that guy. Well, that proves it right there. He's an asshole. And so Vince was telling me how to work the normal media, which that keys to the kingdom didn't come until I got the championship, And so after I get that, and all of a sudden now I'm his guy, at least for SmackDown, Vince started opening up in ways I'm sitting there going, this is why this guy's so successful. What a freaking genius. He came up with so much great stuff. I remember I was in Canada one time, and he goes, what do you have in mind? It's so easy to bash Canada from the United States because the rivalry. It's like Texas, Oklahoma, or Michigan, Ohio State. There's a rivalry there. And I had all this stuff I was going to say about him. He goes, no. Tell him you love him. I said, okay. So I went out there and I said, I just want you to know I'm here in Canada and I love you. Everybody's like, screw you, you liar. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy's great. So yeah, once that happened, it was a different level of communication with Vince. I always had a good one before. I think almost anybody does with Vince. He's a very personable and affable guy, a very approachable guy to anybody. He doesn't care who you are. To anybody, he's very approachable. But after that, it was a different level.
We heard about post-match after the bloodbath at Judgment Day. Here after the Great American Bash, it's your turn to bleed. What's happening post-match with you and Eddie and Vince? I know you're the champ. It was a little switcheroo with Kurt Angle making the announcement. What's the reaction immediately after for you and Eddie and Vince?
Well, Vince wasn't there. He had emergency surgery, I think the day before or the day, something like that, the weekend of. So he called me, and this, I think, a funny story. You'll be the judge. And he says, Big John, I goes, first pay-per-view I had made. He goes, I'm really proud of you. You're going to be a great champion. By the way, the New York Post called you a Nazi. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah, he couldn't get off without ribbing me. So Vince wasn't actually there, but what happened was, Eddie had busted me with the cowbell, and the scar I've got here on my head was a juice mark, but also the cowbell. And Eddie had busted me trying to open me up, and it busted me open pretty good. So I go backstage, and Undertaker's coming back from the ring, and he's telling some match, and I'm getting sewed up by the doctor, and I'm laying there on the bed and the table in the dressing room, and the doctor's sewing me up, and Undertaker's telling some story like only Undertaker can do. And the doctor is sitting there, and like I'm here, and the doctor's sitting there just sewing me up like this, looking at Undertaker. He can't believe this story. And I'm sitting there going, dude, you're ruining my head. And so when I got done, the stitch marks actually had like an open loop in them. And Larry Hank told me that's the worst stitch job I've ever seen. So I've got this scar down my head, right there. You can barely see it because of the light, but pretty good scar because Undertaker told a great story in the dressing room. The doctor was more interested in that than sewing me up.
There's one more big time match you're going to have with Eddie Guerrero. It's the main event on SmackDown, July 13th in Providence. It's a cage match, and it was said to be really good, even better than the Los Angeles match, according to the Observer. There was a big splash off the top of the cage from Eddie Guerrero, a snooker splash, if you will. You kick out, and eventually both of you are fighting at the top of the cage, and here comes El Gran Luchador. He's going to run in, hold Guerrero, and allow you to jump down to the floor. And, of course, eventually when he unmasks, we realize that El Gran Luchador is actually Kurt Angle, and that's what is going to be next for Eddie Guerrero, another renewed feud with Kurt Angle. This is the third and I guess the last big-time televised match you had against Eddie. I know you won the title in the middle with your bloodbath. You had the cage match on SmackDown, and then that crazy bloodbath at Judgment Day. Do you have a favorite of the three?
Yeah, I liked the cage match. I thought we did a great job with it. I thought we did some stuff that was a little bit unexpected. You know, I saw the notes you sent me about the newsletter. It said that Eddie gave me the Russian leg sweep off the top rope. And Eddie had all these moves. I actually gave that to him, and it occurred on the fly. We're both on top rope, and it's a Russian leg sweep. I never even thought about it before. And I thought we did some pretty good stuff in the cage match. I was really happy with it. I wanted, and I never wanted to beat Eddie, ever. I mean, me as a heel, the only thing that mattered is if I retain the championship. I wanted Eddie to have me beating everything. It's the same way I did with Undertaker, with Booker T. I never wanted to beat anybody, because if I brag about beating somebody and I beat them, I'm not a heel. I'm a badass. And I never wanted to be a badass. I wanted to be a heel. So I wanted Eddie to have the match, the big moment off the top of the cage, the interference and stuff. And all of a sudden I survived with the title. And I can say, I just beat Eddie Guerrero. You saw me do it. I beat him right in the middle of the ring, which I didn't do. We were on our way, I think, to Australia or somewhere right after that. We were going on an international tour. So that was our last night. But the day of, Eddie says he's going to do this frog splash off the top, which, by the way, Eddie had broke his arm, if you remember, on his debut match in WWE with a frog splash. His brother Hector, who was a terrific gymnast also, told him, he goes, put your hands together when you land, it'll distribute the weight. So Eddie was a little worried to come off the top of the cage. He broke his arm off a frog splash off the top rope. So Eddie was a little bit worried about it. He had talked to Hector a lot about it, and Hector really helped him in how to distribute the weight when you come off the top. But they had a practice dummy in the ring. And Matt and Eddie in the middle of the day did it and missed it by about 3 feet. And Eddie goes, I'm good. I go, I'm not. I said, you would have killed me. I said, Eddie, you would have killed me if you'd have done that. And Eddie goes, oh, I can do it live. I said, you just had a practice spot and you couldn't do it. I said, you're going to kill me. And he goes, no, Essie, don't worry. So when I'm laying there, that's what I'm thinking is, oh my God. And I didn't want to lean up. If you saw it in the match, I didn't lean up you can see it right there. I didn't want to lean up. I wanted to take the frog splash laying there. And I knew how stiff it would be. And I was hoping Eddie would land it perfect. He couldn't within half an inch have hit it better than he hit it live. Now when he hit me, I lost all feeling on the left side of my body and I couldn't feel anything. I didn't know if I was hurt. You don't know if you're hurt or injured. And I'm thinking I'm hurt. I don't know if I'm injured. And I'm sitting there, I thought, oh my God, don't cover me. Because I couldn't kick out because I had no feeling. And it came back pretty quick. But I knew when he hit it, it was about as good as we could do. And I was really, really proud of that. Really proud of that for Eddie.
You just glossed over the fact that you were laying there and couldn't move. Is that the only time that happened in your career?
No. I had one other time in a match in San Diego. I got hit. Me and CM Punk hit heads. And all of a sudden I lost feeling in all of my body. And CM Punk was wonderful. I mean, Nick Patrick right away, go home. He's hurt or something. And I didn't want to go, and they did. There was a time in one of the pay-per-views. I don't know if it was Mania or not. I don't think it was. I was on the top rope, and I told Chris Benoit to give me the German off the top rope. So many guys that tease that in the cage match. You grab the cage and don't take it. I said, Chris, I said, can you give that to me and not kill me? He said, I'll land you flat. I said, okay, trust you. He gave me the cage match and it knocked me completely out. And in fact, Nick Patrick, I think, was the referee. And he goes, kid, do you know where you are? I said, nope. And he said, do you know the finish? I said, have no idea. And Nick, is such a great referee. He sat there and called the whole thing to me and got me through the match.
Wow.
So yeah, it's happened a couple times. That was, in a moment like that, I'm sitting there worried about it because I thought if he covers me, I'm not going to be able to kick out. I had no feeling on the left side of my body.
Silva, let's take that shot of Eddie standing on top of the cage again. John, what's going through your mind as you're looking up at that cage, knowing what you've seen happen with the tackle earlier in the day? Is that one of the scariest, most tense moments? Like when you're laying there, you see in the background, everybody's standing. Everybody is shocked at what they're about to see, but only one person is the dumb son of a bitch about to take it, and that's you. And when you're looking up there, what are you thinking?
I felt like Morocco. Everybody talks about Snuka jumping off the cage. Nobody talks about Morocco being the landing pad. I felt like Morocco. I'm like, I'm going to die down here. I saw him miss by 3 feet, and he's a big guy. Eddie's, I don't know what it was, 240 pounds. Tried taking 240 pounds off 10 feet up in the air, just land on you. Just land on you. And think about the shock that is to your system. I mean, it sent electrical waves to me. I'm sitting there watching it. It's like kind of like the A-Team, the old reference, we accept death before our mission. I just accepted there's a really good chance I'm going to get hurt. I was convinced there was a high probability I was going to get hurt. And when Eddie hit it, I thought, oh my God, it's perfect. But seeing him come down, I mean, the whole arena almost blacked out because, he's a big guy. He's not 180 pounds. He's a big guy. And I'm sitting there going, oh no, oh no, oh no. I remember a few years later, Ray moved on a frog splash off the top of the cage from Eddie. And I asked Eddie, a couple years later, I'm bad with time. He passed away within a few years, and maybe in a year. Anyway, he's working with Ray, and Ray moved. And I said, Eddie, what's up with that? He goes, I didn't want to hurt him. I said, well, you didn't tell me to move.
That's so great. By the way, this match exceeds all expectations. For whatever reason, it didn't air in the LA market. I think there was a dispute with the local affiliate. So it winds up drawing 5 million viewers, a 3.93 rating. 5 million people watch this taped cage match on SmackDown. It's a jump in males up 17%. So this narrative that JBL and Eddie Guerrero didn't draw or houses were down, the pay-per-view buy rates exceeded expectations because they came in with lowered expectations. That is the key to life, by the way, managing expectations. But when you hear that this thing popped a number and it was up 17%, were you disappointed that they had seemingly moved on and now it was going to be Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle and your stuff with Eddie was done for now?
Yeah, obviously, because Eddie meant so much to me. I didn't want the angle to ever end, but I knew we had to do something there to give it a break. I always thought we'd come back to it, and I still thought we would have. If Eddie hadn't passed away within, a year or two, whatever it was, we would have come back to it. And that's what Vince had in mind at the time. So I knew I didn't want to carry it too long where it killed it. I wanted to leave it where it was still hot enough where we came back to it. Because we didn't know what we needed in the next few, months. We had so many guys getting injured at that time. We had a really thin roster. We didn't know what we needed. And we didn't know we were going to need to come back to it. So, of course I missed working with Eddie, but I understood why the change was made because we knew that you had to stick this in the back pocket in case you needed it.
Well, here's something to stick in your back pocket. The NBA is back, and here's a way to get even more into the action following your favorite players. Playing Pick 6 from DraftKings, an official partner of the NBA. It's super simple to get started. First, just download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, and then select 2 or more players and choose if you think they'll have more or less of a stat, like more points or less rebounds or three-pointers and more. And for all of our first-time Pick 6 players, check this out. New customers play $5 and they get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use the code STW. That's code STW for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccp.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. So listen, we've talked a lot about your real blood feud, if you will, with Eddie Guerrero on camera, but let's talk about real life behind the scenes. When Eddie passed away in November of 2005, you had a fitting tribute. You shared your heart. You talked about real life where you had gone through a divorce, and Eddie sat you down and talked to you in a restaurant bar for hours.
Yep.
And he would bring you scriptures and passages and recommend books, and he was there for you as a friend. I wanted to give you just a few minutes to talk about Eddie Guerrero as a friend, not an in-ring performer, but just a real life man-to-man guy.
Yeah, I'm a pretty private person as far as my home life, and I didn't tell anybody. I was going through a divorce, and didn't tell Vince, didn't tell anybody. Vince found out later and called me. He goes, and because he's really hard on me on a house show about something, and he goes, I wouldn't have been so hard on you if I'd known what you're going through. I said, Vince, that should have nothing to do with my business life. That's why I don't mention it. I didn't tell anybody. And I'm sitting there and Eddie goes, I need to talk to you. And I said, okay. So anyway, we went out to lunch or something. I believe we're in Canada. And he goes, what's wrong? I said, nothing. He goes, something's wrong, S.A. I said, Eddie, nothing's wrong. I said, everything's fine. He goes, how's your home life? I said, everything's fine, Eddie. And finally he beat it out of me. And I told him, and he sat there and talked to me for hours about it, about life, about everything. And he would bring me scriptures. He'd bring me sayings. He'd call me all times of the week and just check on me. He's an unbelievable person. And he did that for everybody. I mean, everybody who met Eddie is kind of like everybody who met Dusty. They think they're his best friend, and they were. Eddie did that with every human being he came across. He was one of the most unique guys that I'd ever seen as far as how perceptive he was to people that were hurting or people that needed help. And he was there for every single person. Never bitched about his own life, never would bring up his own life to say, oh, you're going through that, I'm going through this. That was never Eddie. Eddie was, hey, let me tell you what I think might help. And he would sit there with you. He was a one-of-a-kind individual.
Man, I love hearing that. James Sorensen is with us here live from adfreeshows.com, a part of our studio audience. And he says, what was the best advice Eddie ever gave you?
We were in Japan one time, and we had worked the first night, and we were in Budokan Hall. I believe we're in Budokan. I'm not sure. I don't think it's Korakuen. We're in Tokyo, and we worked the first night, and the match didn't go as planned. And I'm sitting there, I couldn't believe it. And I didn't know why, because Eddie and I had really good matches. And Eddie called me about 2:00 in the morning, and he said, S.A., I got it figured out. You didn't beg. You weren't JBL. I got to Japan, and I immediately went into that Japanese mode, that Hansen mode, that just go, 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 go. And I was different from my character. And the Japanese fans did not understand it. They wanted to see what they saw on television. And Eddie told me, he goes, S.A., you've always got to stay true to yourself. And we worked the next night, thankfully. And at one point, I backed off and I just kind of put my hands up to beg, which they don't do in Japan. And the place went crazy. And I sat there. He goes, I told you, S.A. So Eddie was always helping me. And it was so much to Eddie about staying true to yourself that he would always tell you.
Toe Mater, 1287. What a great line. Says, my question for JBL is, what was your favorite trick that Eddie pulled something behind the ref's back and blamed it on his opponent? Also, thanks for the years of entertainment and entertainment to come. Yeah, when he would do the old switcheroo with the referee, that's a classic spot that I don't remember seeing in wrestling before Eddie Guerrero. I'm sure it had probably happened somewhere, but the magic of that live had to be something else in the ring, right?
It was so fun doing that stuff with Eddie. And again, and they say nothing's new and nothing's really new. I'd never seen it before either. Not to that extreme. Eddie and Kurt Angle were the best. I mean, those are two comedic geniuses. And they were where Eddie would get the chair and he'd throw it to Kurt, and then Kurt would throw it back. It's like the hot potato, like who's going to be caught with it so you can stooge the other one. Those guys were brilliant. I loved being the foil for Eddie. It brought me so much happiness to always be the guy that got his stuff put in his hat, my car wrecked, whatever it was. Eddie driving the limousine when I'm not expecting it. I loved being the foil for Eddie because he was so entertaining.
Gary Robinson has a question. He says, how do you think Eddie would have felt about Dom's run so far, given that his character is almost an homage to Eddie's character?
Oh, my God. Eddie loved heels. Eddie loved heels, and he loved Ray. The reason I chose Ray for my retirement match in Texas was because of my love of Eddie Guerrero and my love of Ray also. But Eddie loved Ray, and I thought, who am I going to try to give all this equity that whatever JBL has to somebody? And it was because of Eddie's love for Ray. He loved Ray, and he loved Dom. I mean, that was that could have been his brother, and Eddie would have been happy with it. Talking about Ray, and Dom was, like Eddie was like a father figure to him. Eddie would have loved it. I saw Dom one day. I was sitting out there. I happened to be in the arena, and Dom goes out there and he cut some promo, and half of it was in Spanish, and no one understood a word he said. We're up somewhere north where there's not a big Latino population, and no one understood it. But the way he cut it with such passion and such venom, the place was booing him out of the building. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Who in the world told this guy to do that? Of course, second generation guys are just different, but Eddie would have loved every bit of it.
Richard Brown is with us here live, and he says, can you share the story of Eddie beating up a fan who jumped the railing in Winnipeg on the fort against
Oh, my goodness. So we're in Winnipeg. Jack Lanza used to work up there all the time. So, Jack's a good friend of mine. So we got up there, and Jack wanted to go meet somebody or do something there in the building, there in the arena. He always had contacts. He had so many people that he knew. He's kind of like Dick Murdoch in Texas. But Jack knew everybody in Winnipeg. So Jack had to meet somebody or do something. And Jack tells me, hey, kid, will you watch the show? Well, I'm like technically agent of the show. I guess I am. I'm sending guys to the ring. I don't know what I'm doing. And so anyway, I'm watching the show because somebody has to stand there at least to look like they know what they're doing. I had no idea what I was doing. And Eddie goes outside the ring, and some fan pours a beer on him. Eddie jumps the rail and beats this fan half to death. And so Eddie's beating up this fan. His friend jumps in. Eddie could fight now. And Eddie's sitting there fighting the other fan. I'm like, what do? I can't run out there. I'm Eddie's nemesis. I can't help him. So I grabbed Chavo. I said, Chavo, go help your uncle. Chavo goes out there and hits the fan next to Eddie. So now it escalates into the Guerreros against Winnipeg. It just turned into a brawl. I'm like, oh, my God. I've been an agent for 10 seconds, and I've had the biggest brawl in wrestling history. And finally, they get all separated. Back then, nobody went to jail. Just got all separated and everything. Lanza comes back right after the match. He goes, how's things going, kid? I go, fine. And he goes, anything happening? No. So about 2 weeks later, Jack said, anything happened in Winnipeg you should tell me? I go, there might have been a little problem, Jack.
What a great story. We're putting a button on our Eddie Guerrero episode. Did we get it all? Is there any other story you want to share?
Yeah, there's one story. We talk about fighting, the story with Kurt Angle, which is such a good story. I'm sitting in the dressing room, and I was dressed by Eddie. And so I'm sitting there, and Eddie's right next to me. He had a match out there with Kurt. They come back, and they get into a fight in Gorilla. And I don't know what's happened because I'm in the dressing room. I don't have a monitor or anything. Of course, they don't have a monitor, what would have happened in Gorilla anyway. But I hear them coming down the hall, and you can tell when a fight has happened. And so as I'm hearing it, I finally make out that Eddie had leg dived Kurt Angle in Gorilla to start the fight. They'd gotten an argument about something in the ring. So they come to the back, they're yelling at each other, the typical fight scene, mob everywhere trying to separate them. And Eddie got on the side of the dressing room that I'm in the dressing room. And Kurt's on the outside, and Laurinaitis smartly just grabs the door and shuts it. And so now Eddie has got a shut door in front of him. Kurt and everybody else is outside of the dressing room. So now Eddie comes back without even looking backwards and sits right beside me. And he's just sitting there looking at that door, and he's so mad. And I'm sitting there just looking at him, and he's not acknowledging me. I'm a foot from him, and I'm sitting there and not acknowledging me. I'm sitting there just looking at him, trying to get his attention. And I start laughing. He won't. He's so mad. I said, why would you leg dive a gold medalist? And he goes, because I'm fucking stupid. I said, that makes sense. Of all things, the Kurt won a gold medal. He's the greatest wrestler on the planet. Don't leg dive it. That's the one thing for sure isn't going to work.
Oh, God, what a bad idea. It's out of the book of bad ideas, but having you stand in for Bruce while he's away is clearly the best idea I've ever had. And if you can't get enough JBL, let me recommend you check out his other podcast. It's Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw. That's right. The legendary Jerry Briscoe joins Bradshaw, and you can catch their stories everywhere you enjoy podcasts, Apple Play or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Check it out. And next week, John, we're going to be back talking all things Undertaker. How fun is that going to be?
Oh, my God. I love this topic. He's the GOAT, in my opinion. I don't know a human being alive that I have more respect for than The Undertaker. He's as good a human being as he was a performer. Books should be written about this guy. He carried the company through good times, bad times. You talk about a freaking legend. He's a special guy. And I've got a ton of stories about it. Hey, one other quick story about Guerrero that I want to say, because you know how much the Guerreros have meant to me by what I've told you. When I did the eulogy, part of the eulogy at his funeral, I was backstage with the Guerrero brothers, and one of the greatest honors of my life was, and I can't remember which brother it was. I wish I did, because I was, a little emotional about, Eddie passing away suddenly. And he told me, he said, today, Big John, he goes, "You're a Guerrero."
Oh, wow.
And I thought, man, that's one of the, I could live to be 1,000,000 years. And I don't know if I'll ever have anything nicer said to me than that. That was a really cool moment for me in a really horrible situation. So the Guerrero family to me is, they mean the absolute world. And you talk about guys that I love, there's obviously Ron Simmons and Bruce Prichard and Eddie Guerrero, and Undertaker's another one of those guys. I got so many wonderful stories. They're all good. The great stories about the Undertaker, man, that guy, you don't realize how good he was. Maybe 20 years from now you will, but he was a different level.
If you haven't already, go hit the subscribe button at somethingtowrestle.com. Turn on your notifications bell so you don't miss us the next time we're live, and leave your questions about The Undertaker. You can find us on social media at Prichard Show on Twitter and Instagram. It's Something to Wrestle over on Facebook. And if you'd like to get blocked by John Layfield, that's easy. Throw him a follow at JC Layfield on Twitter. You may find that you're amongst the 17,000. Let us know about that. But next week, John, I think we've had a little fun, but I don't want to spoil it. But we're going to debut a new segment next week that I think is going to upset a lot of people. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. You talk about, I love upsetting people. It's just, as a natural born heel, which you are one of the natural born heels, which is a compliment from me. Roddy Piper would be very proud of you, Conrad. I guarantee you that. This segment's going to be a lot of fun, but it is going to aggravate some people. It's some snowflakes are going to melt over this.
Buckle up, boys and girls. John Layfield is here, and we'll be back next week talking all things Undertaker on Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what adfreeshows.com is all about. Get early, ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-Free Shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. And you want to talk about early? You can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus, ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered, that adfreeshows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today. And hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. adfreeshows.com.